fiction, science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction, fiction, fiction.
Temporal salutations, all you cognonauts out there, and a happy New Year's Eve. Welcome to Exofathom, the show that dares to explore the outside reaches of thought and understanding. I am Nick, and I am joined, as always, by my two lovely co-hosts, Ayla and Mike. How you guys doing?
Doing okay. I want to say Happy New Year's, and I'm about to uncork my champagne for this episode.
Nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
Very good. That was just a sound effect.
Thank you. It was real.
And we got Mike. How you doing, man?
same old. Hanging in there.
Same old. And it's a very special event. Normally, when we have a special, we like to bring in our buddy from If Numbers Could Talk. Keelan, how you doing, man?
I'm doing awesome over here. Can't complain at all. Sitting on the floor, but
that's
because
okay.
I chose to.
Well, good. I mean, as long as you're comfortable, that's okay.
Yes,
Got
indeed.
to ring in the new year in some sort of comfort, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for joining me. And thank you all for listening out there. We hope you're having a wonderful New Year's Eve. Hope everybody is staying safe and eating some good food and maybe having a libation or two. Today we wanted to talk about something very appropriate. I would say the concept of time. And since it is New Year's, I think that we all get a little bit introspective about maybe how we've spent the year, how the year has gone for us, what we would like to see in the future. And that got me thinking, as well as Ayla and Mike, about doing an episode on time and kind of our fascinations with it. We all decided to curate a 30-minute conversation for you guys, and each is going to be under the umbrella of the theme of time, and we really hope that you guys enjoy that. But before we get started, I always like to ask a question. You guys, what was your favorite part of 2020? I know that that's a loaded question, and I'm trying to make it as lighthearted as possible. But I'm sure that there has been a memory that has stuck out for you, even though things have been pretty rough.
That is a really good question. And I don't struggle for lack of good memories. I think that I've been fortunate enough to be surrounded by people who are really resilient and, they step up in bad times. So, I think maybe on the whole, there's just that gratitude. And then maybe more specifically would be when I went on my first bike ride to the park nearby. Usually I've been biking before, but I'd been on a bit of a hiatus. And when all this stuff started happening, it was very stressful, very scary. And then I was like, I should just get moving. And just being in nature after such a period of like intense news doom scrolling was really helpful. And I remember that ride really well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, it's sometimes the little things that stick out to us. And, it's hard to kind of, especially as we get older, it's hard to kind of parse out the year as, individual months or specific dates. But as long as you can fill it with as many happy memories as possible, I think that's great. Keelan, what about you? What has been your favorite? I think I know the answer to this, but I'll just ask you.
It was not the Lakers championship.
Right.
My favorite part of 2020 was November 11th.
Yeah.
I got married this year. What more can I talk about?
That's wonderful. Yep.
Congratulations again, man. I'm so happy for you guys.
Thank you
Absolutely.
so much.
Yeah, that's a great memory to have, especially with all of the craziness happening. It's a nice little beam of light.
Right.
And a great day. I mean, 11/11.
Mhm.
Oh
Good
yeah.
memory.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
That was so intentional that we didn't plan it.
It just
Ooh.
ended up being.
That
Yeah.
was well, and that's what I mean when I've learned, and not because of our current episode, I have learned the difference between intentional and forethought, right? When I say it wasn't intentional, like we had no control over it, but it was so intentional that the universe put it forth.
Mm.
You know, we would have to have forethought for it to be like, oh, it's something no, we didn't do that. It was perfect. 11
Sounds like
11
it clicked
2020.
in, man.
Yeah, so it was
Stars
intentional
aligned.
by the universe.
Certainly. Yeah, that's
Because
awesome.
now we're in love. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. All right, Mike. What about you, man?
No, man. There's so many good memories. I suppose the one that looks like the lightest is I took a really long drive one night. And I ended up getting home at like 5 in the morning or something.
Mm.
But it was by far the best drive I've ever had. Like the music, the playlist just lined up perfectly with everything that was happening while I was driving.
Yeah.
I got to see some pretty cool stuff happening in the sky. And it was just all around a great experience.
That's awesome. It sounds like another one of those quiet moments that you don't really expect are going to be the ones that stick with you forever.
But they do.
But
What
they
about you,
do.
Nick?
That's a great question. I was trying to think about it, and it's hard for me to parse out one in particular moment, but I would have to say honestly, this, and it's gonna be cheesy, but it's definitely doing this podcast with you guys.
Aw.
It's it's nice to continue something that we've been doing for a long time, and this includes you as well, Keelan. It's just we've always, our friendships have always been about kind of having conversations and talking for hours and having just a good company, and especially during all of this sort of quarantining and lockdowning, it's been a real comfort to have a regular time to talk with you guys and to continue on the tradition of us getting together and spinning yarns about far out stuff. So that's got to be it for sure.
That touched my heart.
I
Aw.
know. I'm a little teary. But I mean, you're right. I was thinking about the podcast and I was like also thinking, oh, it's corny, but it's true. And I think I also appreciate the nature of the conversations too, that like we try not to talk about anything reality based and it's all that far out stuff. And yeah, I hope our listeners kind of feel the same way and they're on this ride with us to just, take a moment and check out and click into the mysteries of the universe for a little bit.
And for me, I thought that was very cool for you to add, simply because something I constantly say to people when they ask me about what we do, or just when I'm thinking about it, is I'm doing something I enjoy. I like to look up and research and learn about new things, and I like to talk. And I like to talk about it with people who I like. And I like to talk about it with people who like that stuff as well. And It just so happens that those people are in my circle, and here we are.
It all
It's true.
compounds.
Yeah,
Right.
and I've been telling Nick, I feel like we're that meme where it's like that dating meme where it's like, I just want somebody to like sit on the couch and talk about the mysteries of the universe with. Like there's a meme somewhere like that. And I'm like, oh, we're like the perfect date podcast, right? Like you could listen to us and, I don't know.
Whoa.
Well, that might be a little bit awkward, but sure.
I don't know.
I
Do
mean-
people sit around and listen to podcasts as like a date?
I don't know.
The
I don't know.
Sapio section of Spotify.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Hope it's not the first
That's the word
date.
I was trying to get out. You're right.
Like if you're on the first date and you're listening to us, you two should talk to each other. You should
You should talk
Yeah. Yeah. Don't listen to us.
No, that's perfect. This is a daters podcast because every time we ask each other questions, the audience should pause it and then they ask each other that question. Ooh.
Well, I mean, there's a certain level, I think we've done that by design for sure. I like to make sure that there's something that you can think about. And we're not necessarily experts on anything. So if anything, we can just bring upon a little bit of thought and contemplation. I'm happy with that.
Hold on,
Mike
I
takes
am
umbrage.
a
Mike takes umbrage, yes.
self-proclaimed
Whoa.
expert on nothing. All right.
Well, that's fair.
And it's an expert. Yeah.
It is.
I second that notion.
We'll
Yeah.
get business cards.
Exofathom, experts at nothing. I like it.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, cool. I'm glad that we got to have a little bit of gratitude before we started the episode, and I'm sure we'll talk about resolutions at the end of the episode for sure. But for now, we wanted to get into the theme of our podcast, which is time. And if you're just joining us, we decided that we're going to take a topic and each present it, and we're going to have a discussion kind of all encompassing around the theme of time. And so when I was thinking about my section, I was trying to think of something that would be interesting, something that I might have experienced myself. And I came across the concept of temporal illusion. And I think we're probably going to be talking about this a lot throughout the episode. But there were just a couple instances that I wanted to bring up to people, and I thought that were interesting myself. So when we talk about temporal illusion, it's a concept of time behaving differently than normal, I guess. And I guess that's kind of a funny definition because time itself is just a construct. But when we talk about these anomalies, I think you'll be very familiar with the concept, and we'll get into it. But I wanted to ask you guys. Actually, I'm just going to jump into it, and then I'll ask you guys on the back end. So, one of the temporal illusions that I was interested in was called chronostasis, and I didn't know that this was actually the term for it. But when I had the idea in my head, I was thinking about the concept, and maybe you guys have experienced this yourselves. If you've ever looked at a clock with a second hand, like an analog second hand, and the instant that you look at the clock, the second hand seems to be in place and takes longer to move than it does the second time the second hand moves. Do you get what I'm saying with that, or do I need to explain it a little bit better?
Well, in public school, those last 5 minutes before yeah, you're just sitting there staring at that clock, and you're like, it's not moving fast.
Yeah,
it's moving slower.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, those. I certainly believe that they slowed down the last hour of school, just to squeeze in an extra hour for the teachers or something. I don't know.
Oh, I did community service in the office. I saw the button for them to do it.
Yeah, just roll it back an hour.
There it is, guys. You got inside intel.
We cracked the code.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I don't know if you've ever had that. Like, I have an analog watch, like a wristwatch. And I've had this experience many times before where I look down at my watch and the second hand seems to stick where it's at longer than 1 second. And then it moves, and then it's moving normal again. Have you ever experienced that, any of you?
I usually see it does a normal second, and then the second is really paused, and then it's normal. But I know what you're talking about. Like, it's a really, really subtle thing, and it's almost one of those things where you think that you looked at it in like at a 40-degree angle, and then you move to like an 80-degree angle, and that's why it seems like it didn't move, because it does seem, it's weird.
Yeah. It is very strange.
I've seen it as well. I think it's because I've seen it in battery powered clocks. I've seen it in those like grandfather clocks that are powered by perpetual motion junk. I've seen it in those as well. So I always thought it was like a mechanical tick. Like when they're making the cogs and things, you can't make everything 1,000 or 100% perfect or smooth. So that's like the hitch in one of the cogs. That's how I always thought it.
Right. Yeah. Mike, what about you? Have you had this phenomenon happen to you?
I mean, my wristwatches tended to jump backwards like 2 seconds and then jump forward a second.
Oh,
the
man.
Mechanics on it.
That's exorcist
broken.
stuff. What is that?
There's black magic happening over there.
That's definitely possession of some sort.
The watches
clearly.
that I've had were all like from my great grandfather. They were passed down mechanical, like the wind up watches, not battery powered. And they couldn't. We didn't take them into a watch shop to get them fixed. So it's probably a mechanical failure.
No, I just thought about the lesson. You said it was from your grandfather. So there was a lesson, right? Progress is 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
Ooh, there you
It's a good
Jump
one.
them 2 steps back and then you jump forward again. I'm sorry.
I do like
No,
that.
it's good.
No, it's good.
It's good.
Well, so apparently there's a term for this phenomenon, which I've always just thought is like a kind of like a glitch in the matrix, and perhaps we'll talk about that in a second. But the phenomenon is known as chronostasis, which translates roughly to time freezing. It's a type of temporal illusion in which first impressions following the introduction of a new event or task demand to the brain can appear to be extended in time. For example, chronostasis temporarily occurs when fixating on a target stimulus immediately following a saccade or a quick eye movement. This elicits an overestimation in the temporal duration for which the target stimulus was perceived. This effect can extend apparent durations of up to 500 milliseconds and is consistent with the idea that the visual system models events prior to perception. So a common occurrence of this is known as the stopped clock illusion, where the second hand of an analog clock appears to stay still for longer than normal when looking at it for the first time. So that's kind of what I was trying to explain poorly there. But overall, chronostasis occurs as a result of a disconnection in the communication between the visual senses and perception. So what they think is that there's some sort of delay going on for your brain to register what is actually happening. When you look at something quickly, this tends to occur a lot more. And so they were able to recreate this phenomenon at the University of London. They created the experience in the lab and managed to connect the experience of stop time to actions of the person engaged or experiencing it. They asked volunteers to look away and then suddenly shift their gaze to a digital counter. When the subjects tried to judge how long they had been looking at the digit that first appeared, they systematically assumed that it had been on there for longer than it had. And so kind of an explanation for why this is happening in the scientific terms, it's called filling the gaps. And so you're moving our eyes from one point to another is so quick and automatic that most of us probably don't even think that we are doing it or even notice that we're doing it. But when you move your eyes rapidly, there's a momentary break in visual experience. And you can get a feel for this by stretching out your arms and then moving your eyes between your two index fingers. If you're reading this, and then as you flick your eyes from left to right, you should be able to detect an almost imperceptible brief flash of darkness as the input from your eyes cuts out. So that's kind of their explanation as to why we have this sort of temporal pause when you look at something quickly, especially an analog watch, because it actually has some sort of mechanism for you to observe. But this interruption in consciousness leads to the illusion of the stop clock. And the theory is that our brains attempt to build a seamless story about the world from the ongoing input of our senses. But rapid eye movements can create a break in information, which could be covered up. And the brain is trying to fill in the gaps, basically. Now, that's the explanation for this sort of temporal pause. And I thought it was kind of interesting because it made me think about, I don't know which episode we were talking, but we had kind of talked about this sort of real-time rendering of the simulation. And it definitely makes me feel like that's another indication of some sort of simulated reality, that if you snap your gaze too quickly, it's almost as if, like your brain has to load in the information that you're about to see, which is technically true. But as we know, this is, scientific stuff is all well and good, but this is Exofathom, and sometimes we have to go off the rails because that's what the show is all about. So I wanted to ask you guys, like, understanding that the scientific explanation for this type of thing is probably the most, reasonable. But what do you think is happening in that split second of your body kind of not registering anything around you?
Well, I think that the point on the rapid eye movement made me think about dreaming. When you're asleep, your eyes are rapidly moving and you're dreaming. So if I had to create
Right.
like a far out theory, I would say that rapid eye movement in waking time allows you to perceive what is there. You can see through the veil, for example, or you see that time. Like, I don't know, maybe it like you get like superpowers or something by rapidly moving your eyes. I don't know. I just tried to do
Right.
it and I almost gave myself a headache. So warning,
Yeah,
guys.
be very careful.
Really
Don't do
tough.
that while you're operating machinery or yeah.
But it is true because like I often will see like a flash of black like out of the peripheral when I do like move my head really quickly or move my eyes really quickly. So I do like the explanation of filling in the gap because it makes me feel a little less like possessed or something like that.
Oh no, that's the shadow people. Sorry.
Stop with the shadow
I was gonna say the
people.
shadow people.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Yeah. Keelan, what about you, man? What do you think is happening when this little like moment of frozen time is going on?
I'm not quite sure, and that's mostly because of how I view that whole moment in itself. It's almost like even if your eye is open, your optical sensors are shut off, right?
Right.
And for that split second, your brain just perceives whatever it wants to. So, well, I guess that is my answer, right? But
Yeah.
in essence, it's like I'm not sure like if there's anything physical happening. I think it is all just, within the sensory and all of that. Like
Just the brain trying to make up for an inability to register information.
Right, so to speak. Yeah. It's like if you're in an airplane, you don't know what's going on outside of the craft. And whoever is really questioning it, like not often do we question what's going on outside of the craft. So I think about it that way.
Yeah, I can get that for sure. Mike, you're my only hope. Come on, give me some Matrix, simulation.
Okay, so
first of all, I just like Mike's. Oh, okay. Let me break your brain a little bit.
First thing is shadow people.
Yes, shadow people.
Maybe when you move your eyes too fast, you slip into that very special dimension between So shadow people usually come around when you're really sleep deprived, like you're going on 2 days without sleep, 3 days without sleep, and you start to see things move in the corner of your eyes, and it's probably it's like the same thing with the psychedelics. It's just an overwhelming amount of light to your eyes that your brain can't perceive. So it's maybe that, but I would like to think it's the shadow people coming and messing with you.
Ever the romantic.
So rude.
Right? It's not rude. They're good people. I talk to them all the time.
I'm sure they're fine.
They're great. They take me places. And then and then the second thing, it just might be like a denial of service attack on your brain, and your brain shuts down. Like all of a sudden everything just hits you in the head, and it's just like nope, can't process this. And
totally.
If it's the Matrix, then I would like you to fill out a JIRA report, a JIRA bug, and send it to the developers so they can fix it.
Yeah, we
that
need
sounds
a
like
patch.
a bug.
Totally does. All right. Well, I have a couple more things that I wanted to bring up to you, and this one actually came up to me. What's up, Kim?
Yes. Yeah, I was gonna say if possible. So I will say this. I will say this. I gave my most mature response. See, we are not being mature.
No, not on this show.
Baby
no, I popped the champagne. We're getting into it, man.
Okay, fine. I do have another theory, but it's not mature at all. Like it's totally childish as hell.
Watch this be like the truth of all things. Go, Keelan.
Well, no, it's okay. So because Mike said something that reminded me. I have a theory about abductions.
Okay.
Do tell.
And my theory about abductions is kind of in tow with those blank spots in our memories and in our daily interactions. And it reminded when he said that, I was like, oh wait, dang, that's right. Those are almost parallel. It's right there. And I'm like, okay, I have to say that. So if I'm not being mature, but no, like
I
in all
like that you
honesty,
say mature. There's like
Well,
a lot of adjectives. It's so
every
perfect.
time you see the second hand freeze for a little bit longer, you've been probed by an alien.
well, not necessarily probe. Like they could have scanned
Okay.
your brain. They could
Okay,
have.
guys.
You could have literally just been picked up for. Okay, so I honestly believe that when we were abducted, I don't want to take us too far left, but I believe that when we were abducted, I don't believe in time travel, but I believe in time stoppage. Right. Well, I'm not going to say I don't believe in time travel, but I don't think time travel as real as time stoppage could be real. And that's where we get, in my opinion, a lot of those mental anomalies. You know, I think that's where people who used to attack the hippies, you know, say, oh, their memories are bad because of this and that. Nah, they were so gone that the aliens just abducted them and kept them for long periods of time. And
oh yeah.
you know,
I have known some hippie-esque folk who have claimed to have been in direct contact with aliens. So I get you. Yeah.
So yeah, I've heard some stories as well. So yeah, and if that's, man, I'm mad I had to admit that, because Mike was like, yeah, they take me all the time, and I'm like, wait,
Yeah.
I have a whole theory about this already. Dang it.
How do you feel about discrete time slices?
Better.
We'll get into that much later. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Definitely. Well, and I love this
jump off
idea
that
of
bridge.
time stoppage. Like, there's
Oh yeah.
so much. Like, well, yeah. I mean, I'm so happy that we're doing this episode and that, like, oh my gosh, yeah. Like, time is just the most interesting topic, I feel.
It is very rich.
I will also add, and then I'll stop adding too much until it's my turn to add a bunch.
No worries.
I also thought that this would take me near wormholes. It did not. I will end this there.
Yeah. That would have been kind of cool. Yeah. But okay, so I have one more, and then I have just like a couple, or maybe like one or two little things that I wanted to share. But the first let's see, the first thing that I wanted to share with you guys was it's called the Good Samaritan experiment. And I thought this was really interesting. And this is more of a commentary about how time, or the lack of, can influence our behavior and influence our actions towards other people. And it's a really short little explanation, but I thought this was kind of a fascinating, maybe it's a fascinating critique on how we run our societies, or maybe it's something less than that. But it goes as followed. The Good Samaritan experiment gives us an idea about how perception of time can affect our behavior. In this experiment, some lecturers were told that they had to go to another building to give a talk. While some were told that they had plenty of time to get there, others were told that they were late and that there were people already waiting for them. On the way, they came across a disheveled-looking person lying on the floor dressed in rags. Most of the lecturers who were told that they had plenty of time stopped to help. However, most of those who were told that they were late passed him by. Ironically enough, and not by accident, the lecturers were due to give a talk about the parable of the Good Samaritan. And the conclusion is that people behave differently because of the time that they thought they had. Those who were in a hurry were only thinking about the future, and they were focused on the apparent lateness, and for that reason did not stop to help. And on the contrary, those who had spare time were more focused on the present and did stop to help. So I just thought that was a kind of nice little bite-size parable of its own, if you will, about the concept of what time can do to us when we have enough of it and not enough of it. And I think that's a interesting concept to think about, especially in society. Now, I may be extrapolating way too far here, and so I wanted to get your guys' ideas and perhaps your input. Do you think this has larger implications for us socially, or is this more just an example of people being in a rush?
I would say, I mean, it's definitely something that you could see play out on a larger scale. I mean, like, you know, those that have really strict work schedules where, they have to punch in and punch out at a very specific time. I mean, like, you do increase the personal out, like, for example, if it's okay for you to go wherever you're going, you're not in a rush. There's not a lot of personal skin in the game, so to speak, to stop and help someone. However, if you have an important task to do, you have to be there. There are going to be negative consequences to you. You might lose your job. That's going to make you behave differently. So I do think it's a question of time, but it's also the question of the way time functions in our society.
Right. How we treat it. And I think that that's kind of what I was going to too. But it also is kind of like it's a statement on a more on a larger social level, but it's also a statement on the much more personal level. And I think I've had this experience in my life before, being so preoccupied about something that might be around the corner that I do not appreciate the immediate and the present. And I think that there's something a little bit sad in that, because we don't get to fully experience life or our full potential if we're constantly kind of chasing that carrot or not allowing the moment to breathe.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Well, I think that's why there's so much trending, so many more articles and things like that coming out about mindfulness, because that's really helping us rediscover the roominess of the present. And it removes the sting of the future. You can just take a minute and slow down.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You know, you guys kind of just said it all for me, but that's exactly what my answer was going to be. It's not so much of, people being in a rush or anything being important. And to what you were saying, Nick, as far as the higher end and lower end of the spectrum of the social and the personal ends of it, I think they are one and the same. If we're not conscious of, like you were saying, the things that are right in front of us, or even the average person goes to eat dinner and has no clue what's going on outside of what they're eating, or where they're sitting. They can't tell you what's going on in the same room. They can't tell you what's going on at the next table. So to be aware that someone is in need at the next table or 3 tables over would be almost Superman-esque in today's society. And because of that, there is no room for it. You're almost frowned upon. And then there's also that, the social implications of being someone who goes above and beyond. I think it takes, and again, I think it all lends to the notion of, we lost the time to look after ourselves, so we have no time to look after the next person, right?
Yeah.
And so that, I think a lot of that is right in that nook or that cranny, whichever whichever you fancy for it. But I think that's what it says. It says that we don't, like you both really already gave my answer, but in that vein, it's just how we approach it all. Like if I think, and I'll give an example. You see someone utilizing some methods from your story, or some elements from your story, excuse me. You see someone in need, and you're, say, in your vehicle passing by, going to do what you need to do. Maybe you can't stop, but you see that no one else is stopping to help. Maybe you can call a first responder or a responder of some sort that could help, although you can't take that time.
Right.
You get me? So that's why I say, I don't think it would be anything important or a time restraint of any sort. It's more of the last part you said, the thoughtfulness, the mindfulness. We are not there personally, and we definitely cannot be there on a social scale if we're not there personally.
Yeah. Well, and I think that there's a temporal repercussion to always being preoccupied, and this is something that I deal with personally, is preoccupation. My mind is always somewhere else, and that can be really detrimental, especially for actually utilizing time, because it's interesting. You spend so much time in your head that you don't actually spend any time doing anything else. And so I definitely see preoccupation as something that could hinder your ability to utilize time properly, especially, and ironically enough, if you're somebody who's always in a rush, you're going to end up making some sort of mistake. But yeah, Mike, what do you think? What are your thoughts about all this?
There's a lot of implications going down here. So those that are always in a hurry, at least for like the 9 to 5ers, are typically late people. People that are typically late tend to be smarter and happier. And it's because of that preoccupation in the future that they're allowed to think so far in advance that they're able to come up with these quote unquote smart solutions towards whatever fucking ridiculous thing that they're talking or thinking about. As far as the responsive nature of coming up on somebody, for me, since I'm always in my head and I'm always preoccupied with the future or the past, I just do a head count. If there's X amount of heads, then I know that that injured person is okay. Like, it's a thing of diminishing returns, right? Like, the citizens that are there to help will help. If there's no one there, then yeah, you want to stop and help. But this the temporal thing is just something that gets drilled into your head from school, right? Like, there's no real issue with being late to anything unless you're so important to that thing that you have to be there. Like, say I'm a cashier at Rite Aid, and every day I'm 15 minutes late to my job, no matter what. Eventually I'll get fired, of course, right? But what really goes down in those 15 minutes that I'm there is, does the store fall apart? Does somebody has to take on a few extra customers and now they're pissed off at me? Like, it's those sorts of things. But I do have to disagree that preoccupation is a bad thing, because the present operates so fast that, like, look, it's gone. Now it's gone again. And it's gone again. It's gone again. It's gone again. Present's gone. Always gone. Why is it always gone?
Stressing me out, man.
I'm trying to hit like a George Carlin cadence.
Sorry.
No, you're good. So like the people that are in a hurry are really only thinking about the future, but whether or not it's good or not is, I don't know. And then lateness, that's relative to your position on time, because there's some people that really value punctuality but don't value output of work. Because I've seen people be on the clock and then just do nothing while they're working, or do nothing to help, but they were at least there. So that if somebody ever asked them like, oh, were you there to help so and so, they can be like, yeah, I was a part of the 50 people that were trying to help one person, and really the job required 2 people or something like that. So the implications, I think, of this overall experiment is we need to stop caring about being late to things.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, I think that's kind of when I'm in preoccupation, I think that I have to speak on my own behalf. And I think that there is a level of variability there that is acceptable and then unacceptable. And sometimes you dive into the acceptable amount of variability within preoccupation, and then sometimes you realize that you spent your entire day worrying about something that didn't even fucking matter in the first place. So I mean, like, I think it's all about balance for sure. And I think you're
anxiety high though, like
an anxiety high, yeah. Fun times. No, I get what you mean. I mean, like, there is a utility in understanding what you want out of the future, and especially focusing on it for sure. But I do think that there, like you said, there's implications for a society that perhaps drives themselves into a frenzy because of time, because of either punctuality or something like that.
Yeah, you always got to hit those deadlines.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Very important. Well, cool. I didn't really have very much else, except for I wanted to touch a little bit about emotion. And I'm not really going to get into any sort of scientific-y stuff, because that is just a plethora of knowledge that will take way too long. But I think we've all been in a situation in which we've all been in a situation in which we've felt time either speed up or slow down. And sometimes, if you notice, it has to do with how you might be feeling. Now, we know the adage, you know, having fun makes time fly, or time flies when you're having fun. Or it can grind to a halt when you're absolutely bored. And so I think there's a kind of an interesting concept there, but it really wasn't anything I wanted to dive into. This is just a really quick aside, and it's just one question for you guys. I wanted to know, which emotion distorts your temporal perception the most?
As in, which emotion makes time go faster or slower?
Yes.
Oh, altercations. Wait, no. Feeling feeling at odds with somebody. I don't know what the emotion is. Not so much anger, but like
Conflict.
yeah, that one. If there's like a
Mm.
conflict, just time slows down and I'm like, and I can
Right.
think of like all the many ways I could respond. And yeah, so yeah, I just get real freezy in those moments.
Yeah, I can get that for sure. Keelan, what about you? What emotion distorts your temporal perception the most?
Anger for sure,
Hmm.
but I would honestly say elation, like joy.
Hmm.
And it doesn't necessarily speed up or slow things down, but I become much more aware when I'm joyous.
Hmm.
I really can't say if that. I don't think that will be a slow down. It's just more of an awareness. I'm much, much, much more aware when I'm in a good mood, when I'm feeling upbeat, happy. And when I'm angry, I'm right in tune with Ayla. It's like I'm Neo in the Matrix. Everything slows down. I can tell you how this grain of sand will fly through your skull.
That's a high velocity throw, man.
You know what I mean? But but overall for me, it would definitely be elation, joy.
Nice. Mike, what about you, man?
Have you ever caught a perfect wave?
Yes.
Unfortunately not. No.
So time pretty much freezes and you get a very heavy visual input. It's also the same feeling I get when I see a beautiful woman. Everything just slows down and stops, and you start to perceive probably everything: the way they walk, the look, of course, the the fucking glint in their eyes, however you want to explain it. So that awestruckness slows down time. When I get depressed or down, I haven't been bored in a very long time, which is good. Maybe like a decade now I haven't been bored. But when I get down and depressed, things start to run faster. I start to see things more like a laser. As far as my thoughts go, the vessel may not be able to carry out its actions, but the brain is always running and it overclocks. It starts to redline. So those are the two polars. So I guess similar to what Keelan was saying, this joy, this good type feeling, and then negativity tends to just make everything faster for me.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I can definitely see all of your guys' examples, and I think it's interesting. Touched on the concept of love a little bit, or at least attraction, like you said. It's interesting to me that love kind of slows and speeds up time. And I mean that in the sense that, spending time with somebody that you love can definitely slow time, make you feel it more, make you very much more aware of the moment. But also spending time with the people that you love and you care about seems to fly by. And I believe that's probably more in retrospect, but it's interesting to me. And I think that that's one of my favorite temporal perception sort of distortions.
But what happens if you love everyone? Are you just constantly going through slow downs and speed ups with no
that'd be very confusing. It'd be very confusing. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, like,
coaster.
For me though, it's like if I'm spending time with the people that I love, it usually goes by way too fast. And as I said, maybe that's a retrospect thing. That's me looking back at it and been like, wow, that went by so quickly. But yeah, I think that love is an interesting emotion, especially when it plays with time, because I think it, can transcend time and also apparently manipulate it.
So it's not a second-hand emotion, is what you're saying.
No, it's got to be first-hand only.
That's a song, right?
Yeah.
I was like, ooh, someone's being funny.
I couldn't. Right, I'm gonna say I couldn't unmute fast enough to be like. I'm sorry.
I'm drinking beer, man. Calm down.
By the way, I really want to spend money to put like a GoPro on somebody to follow Mike and then like send him to like a fashion show or like whatever his lady type of choice is, you know, like an anime convention or whatever it is. And then just like have his face. Because I just feel like a slow-mo Mike in front of beautiful women would be like, oh.
I volunteer to be the cameraman.
I'm pretty sure there's some sort of footage that exists. Two, what I find beautiful tends to be unique, so you just can't shove me in like a fucking Frank's runway model.
Well, that's why you go to Anime Con.
Shit.
That's right. That's why you know that's exactly why you do a runway or some kind of a convention, because there's so many different levels that at some point your interest will be piqued.
Mm-hmm. And we'll see him walking normal, and then all of a sudden it's
oh, such the bad feeling when some woman walks in and like you're awestruck and you're like, oh fuck, this is so much emotional shit I got to deal with now.
Yeah. All right. Well, that does it for me. Thank you guys, and we are going to move on to Ayla now, I believe.
Ooh, yes.
So Ayla, take it away.
Thanks, Nick, and great presentation. Way to kick things off. That was awesome. I feel like I should clap.
No, that's not necessary.
Did you hear that? That was like a tiny clap.
I appreciate it.
Clap.
There it is.
Clap.
So, well, okay. So I've got like a really weird presentation talk thing. I was gonna do. It was really obscure. It was kind of focused on like winter tales about time. So thinking of It's a Wonderful Life, where he has to see his future to understand his present, or like A Christmas Carol, where you have the ghosts of past, present, and future, and just wondering about the solstice and like why, if there were other stories that kind of fall into that grouping. And it didn't really pan out the way I wanted to, but it became something really interesting. So I wanted to start out by just talking about time, because it is something that's not, it's something humans made. It's not something you can touch, and it's something that's really changed over time. It's intrigued humankind for thousands of years. From the beginning of consciousness, man or humans have had some sort of feeling or an idea or a vision about time. You see things age, you see seasons change, people get older, there's a passing and there's movement. And the sun rises and falls to and from the horizon. That you see the moon moving through the stars. So I think gradually for thousands of years, humans have been trying to come back again to the concept of time, and they're just trying to find these fundamental answers to this crazy question. So, a lot of science-y stuff is going to say that time actually started with the Big Bang. And as we talked about in the Hubble episode, that's debatable about when, but it's so far 13.7 billion years ago, and they're narrowing that every day. But even that alone, right? If the clock started at this time and we're over here, and then we revise that time, like we don't revise the history after it. Like it doesn't work that way, because there's like a BC and an AD, and that's just our calendar. And so just to start there and ask you guys a question, like, do you remember a time when you were growing up as a kid and like, you're taught the clock, you're taught the calendars, and then you find out that there's like other calendars out there, or that we, have leap year and that our years are kind of off? Or like, was there ever a time growing up where you were really confused by time and your kid brain was perceiving that?
Keelan, you're up.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I couldn't get to my mute button fast enough. Sorry, your question was, do I remember a time being taught months and my kid brain could not conceive that?
Well, just like the kid brain resisting the idea of time.
The idea of time, yes, but not the absorption of like months in the way they fall. No. And for me, it was
Okay.
more the days. Months and all of that was pretty easy, but for me, it was days.
Like Monday, Tuesday,
Yeah.
Wednesday?
It only got easier for me, if I'm being honest, once I was on like a solid, like, okay, Monday through Saturday, I had a solid schedule by around like 7. So then it just started getting easier for me to keep up with days and things like that. But
Yeah.
the months and everything, that was always pretty easy. I don't know why, but months were always pretty easy. But that was also set up the same way. It was a kind of sports, I think, helped keep a lot of that intact for me.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, like to anchor your time understanding with events. And I totally get that. I
And
remember
sports changed with season.
sport. Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. And that's like biannual, right? They like train for a little bit, then they play
For the
and
most part,
goes
yeah.
back and forth. Yeah, but I get it. Like weekdays. And I'll tell you, I remember also struggling with that. And the reason is that there were some calendars that started on a Monday. It's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Then there were some calendars that start with Sunday. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Okay, that's not
And
just me that remembers that.
right? And like there for some reason I was like, "Wait, is the first day Sunday or is it Monday?" And I couldn't figure it out. And then that started this whole like spinning mind thing where I just was like, wait. The month numbers change also? Like what? Like,
Wow.
it's very confused.
What about you, Mike?
Yeah, I've always had issues with time. So I've suffered from insomnia since I can remember. So I never got on a real good, solid sleep schedule. Also, too, how do I want to phrase this? From an early age, I started losing a lot of family members. And so the emotional toll of death extends time very, very long, where I may like click in and click out as far as wanting to be aware and unaware. Like there's some sort of automated sub process just running in me that can deal with time and just kind of tries to fit myself into other human schedules, but the base always had this weird confusion with it. So my kid brain didn't really do too well with time. Like I remember just living one long day over the course of, I guess, 2 or 3 days or something like that. But months never really clicked in. School helped, sports helped, because you can at least keep time with like when football season starts, when hockey season starts. The only thing left on TV is baseball. This sucks. Things like that.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah.
and I think you hit a really important point, which is about trauma and time, because, multiple deaths in the family, that can be really traumatizing, especially for a kid. And I think that will also alter your perception of time, or if you're coupling that with a crazy schedule or insomnia, it's funny, like our minds understand time. So you might know like, well, I went to school yesterday, I'm going to school again today. That's a new day. But your body, it has a different perception in terms of like when you have a routine. Like when you have a routine, you do the same thing. Like let's say you wake up every day at the same time. Eventually you don't need your alarm clock, assuming you're getting enough rest, because your body starts to like know, it feels like something's supposed to happen. So I think that's really interesting.
No, yeah, no, I think you're spot on. Like now I tend to get up at a certain time because my body feels like it's supposed to be doing something. But luckily now I have enough freedom where I could just go back to sleep, which is great.
Nice. It's awesome. Well, Nick, how about you?
I was thinking, and I decided that I want to go back to being 7 years old again.
Why?
Only because time went by so slowly, and I think that that's something I really kind of not necessarily covet, but I definitely appreciate about young people and children. They have no concept of what time is. They minutes last hours, hours last days. Like it. I remember very vividly how slowly time moved when I was a kid.
Oh man, just give yourself amnesia.
Yeah, maybe that'll work.
Kids experience less time than you've experienced, right? So you experience more time as you get older, so the feel becomes different, I think.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, like I think that my perception of time as a kid was definitely much more drawn out. I mean, I can remember summers that just felt like they lasted forever. And yeah, I think that that's kind of an interesting thing. And it's almost interesting too, because it looking back at it, you can kind of get a taste of it almost. If you think about it, when when you were a kid, you can almost get a taste for that feeling again of how fresh everything was. And I think that that's kind of a cool experience.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think, kids definitely tend to live more in the present. And I think that like that does extend things. I also feel like maybe our parents had something to do with that because when you're a kid, I don't know about you, but I had to wake up really early to catch the bus in the morning. And then my parents didn't want to deal with me being tired the next week. So they made me wake up at the same time on the weekends. So I started the day with sunlight. And even today, like if I wake up at 6 a.m., and I'm like going about my day, by 2 o'clock, I'm like, dang, this is a long day. So I wonder too if there's something to do with like planetary perception too, like the sun, rising with the sun and stuff like that.
Yeah, circadian rhythms are definitely important. And yes, I definitely can experience those times of kind of temporal elongation if I wake up when the sun is before the sun rises. I think I have that's kind of a nice little life Easter egg for anybody who wants to go and do that. But like if you get up before the sun rises, you'll realize that you have a lot of time in your day. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of nice when you look at when you're at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you're like, man, I've been up for like 9 hours already.
Right.
And I've gotten so much done, or I've experienced so much, or whatever. And I think that there are little hacks like that you can do.
Oh, definitely. I think
Right.
I'm very excited for the time change. Keelan?
No, I was gonna just add to what Nick was saying. Time when you wake up before the sun rises or with the sun, 1000% it moves. It just moves differently. I can remember, and well, not just can remember because I still wake up around 5:30 or so. But now the sun rises around that time. Right? Sun catching up to me.
I
But,
know. Half of the year I'm like winning, and then the other half I'm like,
right, exactly. But before that time, before the sun is coming up at that time, working out before the sun comes up, you almost feel like you didn't work out. Like you feel like you didn't lose any sleep, like you didn't change your rhythm, anything. But believe you me, when you work out, even with the sun rising or just a little after that sun's already peaked and it's already coming down on you, it feels different. The rest of your day moves different afterwards. And it's still positive. Don't be misunderstood. But I had to agree and add that just because that is my experience to co-sign what you were saying, Nick.
Oh, that makes total sense too. Because even like on road trips, Nick and I always like to leave at about 4 in the morning or 5 in the
Same.
morning. And I don't know what it is. It's almost as if I leave in darkness, the time that we're driving, you don't feel it. And then when the sun rises, you're like, okay, now I'm starting my drive. And it just makes your drive seem shorter. It's really interesting. Well, yeah. And, I love all this kind of like perceptual musing about time because we measure time not just in minutes and seconds, but in terms such as like early and late or fashionably late. And there's been a lot of historical adjustments to what the length of a workday is and should be. And if you ask people in the United States or in Europe or in Japan, even today, you're going to get different answers. And so those subjective views, they really help explain why standardizing time has been met with a little bit of like hesitancy, and in some cases even resistance. So like historically, and I didn't know this, but countries haven't been eager to embrace a global clock. Being they kind of like felt compelled to because of the demands of commerce, but there's still a lot of pushback in terms of like, well, which calendar? Like I know there's kind of like a predominant one, but then that's like we're in America. So like if you go somewhere else, you're going to see different stuff. And in fact, in the United States, the National Standard Time didn't come out until 1883. And this is where I found it really fascinating. It became about because of the railroads. So all of the railroads had their stopping places and they needed to have a common timetable. So before that, cities pretty much kept their own local time. And many were not happy to have big government and big railroads force standardization on them. And in Cincinnati, the phrase was, "Let the people of Cincinnati stick to the truth as it is written by the sun, moon, and stars." And that was a newspaper headline or something once that like change was going into effect. And
I love how quaint like conservatism was back then. Like, let us keep our own time. No big government time.
I know. And like it's funny because like we were just born into this world where you have Eastern Standard Time, Pacific Standard Time. We all have the same time. Regionally, we know it's different, but we all have the same stuff. Like imagine driving to, I don't know, Santa Clarita and they have their local time. And so you'd have to time adjust locally rather than like by time zone. And like, I don't know. Any thoughts about that?
It would make commerce impossible.
How would you keep an appointment?
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But isn't the sun still in the same spot in the sky?
Yeah, you'd have to like make sure you're there the day of and base it off of like we'd all have stopwatches then, right?
Like on a human level. Like
Mhm.
it's all the same thing. Like I've traveled back and forth in time, days in time, and I guess one day in time. But it all feels the same. It doesn't really like the thought of it more breaks your mind than the actual experience. The actual experiencing it, it's you just live life.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I mean, for sure. And I think what that little story was getting at was just kind of how um, people's perceptions of standard versus local time. And even like, I won't get too much into it, but there is a distinction now about monochronic and polychronic time. Where, so like a monochronic society would be like Europe and the United States, where time is perceived as fixed and unchanging and people tend to complete tasks sequentially. But in a polychronic society, so here in this article, and I don't know, I should probably have read 6 more articles just to make sure all this stuff was right, but I was short on time. But they say that like in Latin America and much of Asia, time is going to be more fluid and people adapt more easily to changing circumstances and new information. So you can see there's like pros and cons to both of those. Like I'm thinking about Mike asking, well, if I show up to my job and I'm 15 minutes late, I might lose my job over that. But like what actually happened? And like I remember I visited Laos and I loved it because any store you went to, the people like half of the stores, you'd see folks napping or just hanging out outside. They weren't like married to their job. So then they would kind of like pop out when somebody came up. And I was talking to one of the tour guides there and he was just saying like, yeah, everyone usually has like a little hammock behind the little office area. And I just loved that. And I don't know, do you guys think that we'd see like a big shift if we kind of got off of this like rigidity to time and timekeeping?
In certain aspects, I think we would. But there's so many different things at play already, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just removing time wouldn't remove, and it's been around for so long as well, the concept.
Mm-hmm.
removing it wouldn't change people's susceptibility to already being in the routine.
True.
Like people are, like we were saying a minute ago, with Mike, there are just things that are programmed at a certain point now. So you wake up after X amount of hours go by, your brain and your body's going to say, hey, this is what I think we need to be getting done. Or yeah, and that's the way you're going to move. I think this year alone has made a big, huge point of that. Huge.
Yeah. Was that a New Year's Eve gunshot or something? What was that?
Huge firecracker.
A
It was a
firecracker. Nice.
I literally just saw it out of the top of the window, and it was huge.
Oh, good for someone. I love that. And that brings us to the next section. Unless did Nick and Mike?
Mike and me got to answer here.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, I was going to pass over to Nick. I'm the completely wrong person to ask about this. Time doesn't exist.
You're like, time exists with the sun and the moon.
Right.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
Tell big government get their hands out off our stopwatch.
Just, like the measurement is important because we have to be able to say, hey, we're having a podcast at this time, right? I don't want to have to like get a tool out to measure where the moon is to figure out if we're supposed to meet, and I don't want to sit by myself waiting for people to show up. So the measurement is important, but whether or not just don't ask me.
You're like, it doesn't exist anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple points that I wanted to make. I don't necessarily think that, I mean, it's difficult because it's one thing to say like, oh yeah, well, a person in maybe in a poorer country who has, a shop that they also live in. Yeah, of course they're going to have a hammock in their back. But I think that, like there's all of it's bred out of necessity, right? So like we look at the way we treat time in America and in, more Western societies or whatever. And, we can lament the rigidity of this structure, but I don't necessarily think that it would be beneficial to eradicate that system specifically for infrastructure purposes. We can't have the food supply truckers just decide when they want to drive or when they need to be somewhere. We can't have, EMTs and fire people, like deciding when they want to be somewhere. I understand that that's a little bit different. They respond to emergencies, but I think that this rigidity of the structure is just bred out of the necessity of keeping a society running. And the more intricate the society becomes, the more rigid the structure has to be in order for it to work.
And I think that's a good. Oh, am I cutting you off? Sorry.
No, you're not. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that. I mean, that's perfect because the whole time standardization, at least for the U.S., it was out of necessity as we developed and got our railroad system. And there was a social psychologist. His name's Robert Levine. And again, I wish I had time to look up competing research experiments, but he set out to determine the tempo of 31 countries, and he used measures such as the efficiency of local post offices and then the accuracy of public clocks, which I think is weird to have those be the two things. I mean, the post office I get, but the accuracy
thing that was around back then.
I guess, yeah. But he said that he found that Switzerland, Ireland, and Germany were the fastest countries in terms of like mail delivery and accuracy of clocks, whereas like Mexico, Brazil, and Indonesia had slower postal service delivery times, and the clocks weren't that accurate. Which
I wonder if that has anything.
I
wonder if that has anything to do with climate.
Yeah, or just like
climate has
weather. Like
not just that. Something else I heard. Sorry, but something I wanted to add as well. Something else I heard was you said Switzerland. What are those top three countries?
Switzerland, Ireland, and Germany.
Okay, those are all manufacturers and mechanics.
Right. Yep. And I think that speaks to Nick's point too. It's like if you're trying to maximize output, then yeah, you want everyone to be at the same place at the same time doing their jobs. And that's how you get like that efficient see. And you're right, like manufacturing, that's also part of like cogs in a machine kind of thing.
It's also the climate, I believe, because, and I didn't bring this up in my presentation, but I'll just do this real quick. It's not long. I just have to say that apparently there's something called the sort of what was it called? It's called like the chemical
Clock
temporal,
hypothesis.
the chemical clock hypothesis.
Yeah, well, I saw your section effects
Oh
of
yes,
body temperature.
yeah. So that's what I mean. So apparently, in higher body temperatures, you experience time more dilated than in colder body temperatures. So I'm wondering if, because those countries are predominantly colder most of the time, their efficiency is a little bit higher because of the perceived time of a colder body. Whereas in a hotter climate, you feel like you have more time.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Whoa.
Well,
Once
also
you move
too,
your
like,
body, though, it gets hotter, right? Like you're using energy. Your body has to heat up. So maybe in hotter climate, they might be more sluggish because it's so hot. They don't want to do anything. Whereas in cold climates, it's like, holy shit, I have to warm up.
Yeah, you gotta go run for
gotta
that.
The hustle is up. Yeah, I just made summer and winter make so much sense on the East Coast specifically.
Oh, I bet.
Not so much here in California, but
Right.
places where they actually get winter.
oh, totally, totally. Well, cool. And yeah, I think that there's a lot more to talk about in terms of these monochronic and polychronic societies and evaluating the efficacy of the two of them. I think all of it again stems from the fact that time is just like so elusive. And so, because we're doing our New Year's special, I wanted to point out that, New Year's Eve, it is one of the largest celebrations. It's the last day in the Gregorian calendar. Um, and it's one of those things, too, that it's been around since ancient Babylon. So,
Hmm.
the idea of a new year dates back maybe 4,000 years to 2000 BC. Which is a long time ago. And according to history.com, Babylonians celebrated the new year at the first new moon after the vernal equinox. But usually that would have been like late March. And they did this 11-day festival called Akitu. And,
No ruse.
no ruse. Oh,
Mhm.
interesting. I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
In Persian tradition, we follow the same New Year. So that's March 21st, I believe. Or the 22nd's the day after the vernal equinox.
Do you do an 11-day honoring too? Or
No, it's not necessarily, it's not 11 days, but it usually is like a week.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that, like, for at least like what I've seen, you have like the table spread.
Yeah, each thing has so you have something called Haft Scene, which is like the 7 things. I don't know what scene means in Farsi. I'm sorry. But it's like you have 7 representations of like the springtime, basically. So you have like a pomegranate, and then you have like wheatgrass, and then you'll have like just a fish, and you'll have like all of these like like abundance symbols in order to kind of help bring in the new year.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's really cool to see. And I think the older folks give you money, right? That's
Oh
like
yeah,
the
well
other
that's the best part. Yeah.
yeah, time's moving fast on that day. Well, just to zip through some of this, because I know I'm taking up a bit more time. One of the things that was really cool is that these different civilizations welcome the new year usually during significant astronomical or agricultural events. So it wasn't so much a calendar, it was like the moon or the season or an equinox. And it was actually the Romans, they started celebrating it in March, but then Julius Caesar introduced the Julian calendar. Of course, he did. And it honors the month's namesake, Janus. Now, Janus is the Roman god of beginnings, whose 2 faces allows him to look simultaneously into the past and the future. And Caesar instituted January 1st as the first day of the year. And on this newly dated holiday, the Romans celebrated not only by offering sacrifices to Janus, but also by exchanging gifts, attending parties, and decorating their homes with laurel branches. Now, I thought that was really cool because, again, I started this whole discussion because I was thinking about uh, the Christmas Carol and things like that. And I thought it was really groovy to hear that kind of New Year's and this theme of retrospectus and looking ahead, looking at the last year, setting resolutions. It kind of all comes back to Janus, this Roman god.
And when you spell January 1st in shorthand, it spells out Janus. Weird. No.
Mind blown.
Total mind blown.
No, it's super weird. And then like if you look at the New York City ball drop, so what does it say? It says that the custom of like dropping a sphere, it was inspired by an old maritime tradition in which, quote, time balls, end quote, were dropped at noon so sailors could adjust their clocks to the local time. So I thought that was really weird. So can you imagine being a sailor and you're all standing there and you watch this ball drop and you're like holding your watch and you set it? Like, I don't know.
I wouldn't even know what that looks like.
Yeah, time before the internet. Like, and I even think about like before Google, before internet, because we were youngins at that point. Like, yeah, like clocks, like you always had to have batteries in the clocks, right? Like you always had to make sure your watch was working. You didn't even have a phone.
You used to use a phone to call the atomic or the standard clock, like
that's right. There was a phone
where you could call and be like, it is January 1st at 1:04 a.m. Like,
I remember. Do you guys remember that, Keelan?
Yeah.
Mike?
I never doubt it.
Is it still around?
I don't know.
I was gonna say I think it's still around. I needed it a few times when I was younger, but yeah. Short answer, I remember it, and I do think it's still around. I just don't know why anyone would need it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and so like thinking about time and the fact that like pre-internet, we had to use all these different ways to match up our time. My watch, I match it up with my friends. We match it up with our teacher's clock in the classroom. We call this hotline. If you had to define time, I know you guys are going to hate this question, but if you had to define time in like one sentence, how would you define it? So Keelan, I'm directing this to you first.
Time in one sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Time in one sentence. Okay.
It's hard.
Buying time. Actually, that's kind of it. But no, buying time in one sentence. Life is time is your story, or your story is your time, basically.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a really good one. I like that. Mike?
Undefined.
Oh, I like that. Undefined, period.
You can say time is life.
Time is
Or
life.
life is time.
Mm-hmm.
One of the two. Whatever you like.
Story and life, those are very similar. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. Nick?
I was going to go something like, dumb and snarky and be like, it's the measurements of distance. And
you can.
Yeah. No. I'll try to think of something a little bit more poetic.
Bill, come on, dude.
Yeah. I think time is what you make it. Like it really is just kind of like, it is what you make it. It is your perception. It is really only true to yourself, and then we all just kind of agree on it socially. So time is what you make it. If you want to make it great, you can. If you want to make it not so great, you can do that as well. Like it's
I dig it. And I like that you added that social element because the passing of time, where it's our story, it's our life, it's very subjective. The necessity of time, it comes about with the collective, with interactions with others. And there's a writer, Alan Zaid, and he has this really interesting article. What was it called? It was called, let me get to the title, which is really long. Oh, it's simply called Human's Delusion of Time. So I know that was good. But he takes a minute to kind of talk about how wrong we are about time. And then he asks, well, what is it? And he gives us 5 definitions. There's a logical definition. It says time is a logical link in human minds to any physical process that has observable duration. He said there's a physical definition of time. Time does not exist and never existed as a physical property of the universe, which is kind of interesting. Mathematical definition of time, which is time means a rate of durations between any two different physical processes. A philosophical definition, time is ancient, innate ideas of humankind. Common definitions, time is a link between indication of a clock and duration of its own internal recurrent physical process. And then to that, he says, what is now? And he says, now is a point in the universe from where an observer makes interaction with surrounding universe. And so I thought that was just kind of a cool place to end it, because like A Wonderful Life, like A Christmas Tale, I think that part of time's definition is that it's a tool, and that this tool can allow for reinvention and self-reflection, depending on which state of time you're looking for. So I don't know. Did you guys have any thoughts about what I kind of went over and then connecting it to A Wonderful Life and A Christmas Tale and just kind of like the reflective nature that time can have?
I don't think I've ever seen A Wonderful Life of a Christmas Tale.
Oh, really? Well, okay. So there was like the Muppets. You didn't see that in like school or something?
Okay, maybe,
Well,
maybe,
Timmy?
and time simply doesn't add up. No, I don't know. I don't know. You can just give me a basis on what's the base.
Oh, yeah. So in It's a Wonderful Life, there's a guy. He's a banker. And he's got a pretty happy life. He's got a good family. And then like shit hits the fan and everyone's mad at him and he's going to kill himself on a bridge. And this angel shows up and shows him the future if he's dead. And it just gets worse. His family's destitute. Like bad things happen. And so that allows him to say, okay, maybe I shouldn't kill myself and I can try a different approach. And then in A Christmas Carol, you have a Scrooge kind of character, and he is a bad guy. And then I think like on Christmas Eve, these ghosts come up to him, and there's the ghost of Christmas past.
Oh, okay. The Scrooge. Okay, I know the Scrooge story. I didn't realize that's what that was called. I know.
Oh, yeah. And then the ghost of the future. So
right. Okay. And your question is?
Oh, yeah. So the question is just in terms of thinking about time and it's like this amorphous, undefined thing. How is it that still somehow the understanding of time helps us self-reflect or like course correct and reinvent who and what we want to do?
I think it's mostly self-reflect. Not self-reflect, but just reflection. That moment, as we were saying earlier, a lot of people aren't in the moment. So because you're not in the moment, you have to have these external forces come into play. And I think in reality, it happens when we give ourselves that moment to reflect, or to put some thought. A business plan is kind of that ghost of Christmas future in a sense. Like you have to be that ghost of Christmas future for yourself. But a therapist is like that ghost of Christmas past. Like you have to dredge up all these thoughts and emotions and things that you kind of wanted to leave back there and never come back to.
Oh, good points. Both of them. I really like that.
So I think they are very prevalent and evident in today's world. And that's how I see them. And mind you, this is a guy who never really saw, like, even knowing the Scrooge story, I never cared for any of those movies or anything, simply because I always felt like they didn't have certain elements in them, but I also didn't give them much of a chance. So I'm not going to go too far with that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm just weird. I had a crush on the main character from It's a Wonderful Life. What's his name? I can't even think about it. But he was like in this old black and white called Harvey, and he had like an imaginary
Jimmy
friend that was like
Stewart.
Jimmy Stewart. Yes. Oh my God. I had such a crush on him. So anyway, it's weird girl crush as a kid, but good points, Keelan. Mike, any thoughts about the same question?
How do I want to say this? I think the undefined and how you build your timeline, essentially, it gives way to whether or not you will love your fate, wherever your timeline ends, and whether or not you're comfortable repeating that.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah, very Nietzsche-like of you to say.
More fuck you. But suppose you got to relive everything all over again, and you have to do everything the exact same way. You have no options. You just got to do it. You can love it. You're pretty much golden. And so to me, time is that tool. So that self-reflection of like getting over that thing of like, I wouldn't do this, or I'm not going to talk about this, or I'm shameful towards this. It's like, no, fuck it. Love it. Because if you come back, you're going to have to do it all over the same way anyways. So
true.
Sort of like screw.
True. I like that. Especially because, yeah, it does tie in with the idea of just like running through these game plans and, using it as like a roadmap to kind of figure things out.
Yeah, you give yourself breakpoints to reflect and then course correct to something that is more within reconciling your nature. And as long as you can reconcile your nature, no one can get to.
I dig it. That's really well said. Nick, any adds to that discussion?
No, I think what's been said is more than sufficient. I don't necessarily have much more to add, to be honest. I think that you guys said it best.
Oh, thanks, man. Well, yeah, and that's all I got. Just in a not so nutshell. I think that went a lot longer than I intended to. So sorry about that, guys. But thanks so much for listening. And yeah, I think I'll pass the torch over to Keelan next.
Didn't.
I just pictured you in a robe, like a UFC.
Oh God, yeah, that was my intro music. Now coming to the ring. So my section, similar to Ayla, similar to Nick, kind of found a tangent of its own, but in a very good way. And within that, I might have asked for a little more participation than asked for before, but my goal is to get the perception of time across and how not only it affects us today, how it has affected the way we go about things in society over time, from who leads us to how we go from our day to day. And I found a few references, found a story that I really, really liked from a website that I'm going to share, and like to hear it. Here it go. So, I want to start with a question for all of you, and this might be my only real prosed question. Everything else will probably be a little insinuated as a question. But my question is time measurable? Is time measurable? And to give a little context on is time measurable, remember we're talking about the perception of time, and that varies from person to person. So Mike, is time measurable for you?
Yes. And I will give you three the following challenge because I feel really bad. I have to run to the restroom. So you can count the time it takes me to come there and come back and then let me know.
Hey, we will measure this interval. We will measure this interval.
Yeah.
What about you, Nick?
Well, yeah, I mean, like in some sense, of course it exists and it is measurable. It is intrinsically a measurement. But what I thought was interesting, and this kind of goes back to a little bit of what Ayla was saying, especially about the definitions of time in a physical sense, where they said that there was something about the universe, and the universe time doesn't exist, in the universe, and that kind of made me wonder something, because if time doesn't exist and is sort of this immeasurable construct that we just kind of create, then how do we know that the universe was how do we know the universe began in the first place? And I think that that's kind of one of my questions that ties into what you're saying. If we have the ability to utilize time to measure, but it doesn't necessarily mean that time exists outside of this little ball that we're on, then I guess it's not really a question. My whole point is like, well, then I don't really understand the point of it in the first place.
Right. What say you, Ayla?
Well, I guess it does. Well, it's a tough question. Because yeah, like Nick was saying, how do we know these things? And we just did an episode about the age of the universe, and that's largely based on distance. So assuming the Big Bang, we were all at location A, and then the bang happened, and now you have planets in location X and we're in location B. If you find the distance from B to X and you factor in the Big Bang as the starting point, you can calculate like velocity, and then you can calculate time somehow. What I don't understand though is that we keep reevaluating the Hubble constant, which is what's used to determine the age of the universe, but we don't ever adjust our time scales. And I think it's one of those things where, like, we still have AD and BC.
Well, and
I don't
if
know if
time
AI. Well, yeah, like
Sorry.
if AI wakes up or something, are we going to have like a CC or a computer age or something? Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's measurable, but it's very flawed.
So,
Well, yeah.
do you want to know how time is ran on a computer real fast? I'm so sorry for interrupting. So,
No. Go ahead.
1 minute.
So
No.
Oh man, that took longer than expected. So time from epoch is January 1st, 1970. So anything you do on a computer relating to time, say if I grab a time date source or just the time of the host machine, it always counts from January 1st, 1970. So that would be your AI CE sort of thing.
Totally. Oh, I never knew that. Thank you, Mike. That's really cool and creepy.
I was just gonna say that's weird.
Dude, they just picked the date, or they just picked the time. It's like, just let it run from here; it'll be fine. It gets so
Nobody will notice.
Yeah, computer cycle itself runs on 10 to the negative 9th seconds. So you can count 10 to the negative 9th seconds, but just say that something took 2 to the 10th of the 20th.
Wait, hold
time
on.
units sounds
to
ridiculous.
The -9, so like negative time? No.
No. Point, it's scientific notation, so it would be 0.0000000001.
Oh, does negative denote like 10 zeros or something like that?
Right at the
before the decimal point. Before or after the decimal point.
I miss math. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
No, before or after. Yeah.
So, Mike, is that your answer to how time is measured?
No, to me, time's like actual measurement. It's in events weighted by emotion to me. So there are certain moments of my life where I swear I think I'm in like 5 different days all at once all the time. But there's moments that I just can't let go, and I don't think I'll ever let go. It's a me thing. But yeah, that to me is how I measure time, is in those moments that I hold golden to, we'll call it my soul.
Nice. And Ayla, I want to make sure, did you have anything else to add for your answer?
Well, Mike over here mentioned soul, and I don't know. I mean, because yeah, like time is kind of like, yeah, well, I'm alive now and I'll be not alive at some point. So a lot of my perspective measurements of time is relative to me being alive. But it's like, yeah, if my soul has been like reincarnated, then like, how do you measure soul time? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can't prove nor disprove that the soul's alive. So
I think like nearly a decade ago too, we established that like I'm either extremely old soul or a brand new soul. So I can't even help you with that.
Oh, I know. I'm definitely a new soul. Nick's an old soul, though. I don't know. Souls.
Shots fired. Jeez.
Hey, I'm an ancient soul, Nick. Don't worry.
Oh, okay.
But I feel like that might make me an immortal soul, but that's a different discussion. Hey, invite me for
shit.
another episode.
Wait, are you saying you're free from time? Because if you are free from time, let me know. Send me an email, a memo.
What
do you know, sir?
What's the guy's name? Vandal Savage,
Vandal Savage.
DC Comics.
Oh.
No, Vandal. You don't know Vandal Savage, the immortal?
I'm looking up. I need
to
let's see here.
Yeah, essentially he's not Apocalypse, but like Apocalypse, he is an original mutant, like the original deity.
I got you.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I would see that movie. Apparently they're talking about doing a movie for Vandal Savage.
Oh, that would be awesome. Wait. I don't want to do that to myself. Because he has nothing to do with time. Now, if we were talking about cable, we could keep this going. But so as far as the time being measured for myself, I believe, and I'm very much in tune with what Mike is saying. What I was saying earlier, and I even found a story that goes right along with it, that, you know, our time is measured by stories. It is our experiences. It is our memories. At least that is what I believe. And a lot of my research and the things that I found, I don't want to say that they prove that, but they affirm the notion that I had, at least in my mind. I can't say that that will be true for all. And so I'll begin from that point, moving into a few quotes that have been said through this podcast about time and others that I've written down. Of course, we all have heard time flies when you're having fun. We also have heard time drags when you are bored. We've all been told that time is on your side, but we're also aware that time is racing up against us. It was in 19. It was in 1748 in an essay that Benjamin Franklin wrote that time is money. And that was an essay written to a young businessman from an elder businessman, of course. And what we notice over time, at least in my opinion, right? But I believe we all can say that what we notice over time is the things that we have experienced, the things that happen to us young, not the things that happen to us so much so in our 20s and our 30s or our 50s and our 60s when we get there, but the things that happen in our single years, you know, the 8s, the 9s, the 7s, the 6, 10, 11, 15. Those are the things that molded who we are today. And that is why I believe time and our memories and our stories coincide. But I have a few things that are going to help bind those things. One starts with schedules. And Benjamin Franklin was the catalyst behind that. For anyone who doesn't know, Benjamin Franklin, he didn't keep a schedule. He kept a journal. And his journal was his schedule. It was his calendar. It was his day-to-day. So I have an excerpt here that reads from Benjamin Franklin's autobiography. This is from medium.com. And it reads, "The precept of order requiring that every part of business should have its allotted time. One page in my little book contained the following scheme of employment for the 24 hours of a natural day." That is what Benjamin Franklin wrote about his journal for a single day, 24 hours. He followed a scheme. He had a little book that had a page that followed a scheme. So a plan, a schedule for every single day. And it is also noted that over time, what Benjamin Franklin did, and the reason it was a journal he made rather than a schedule or a calendar, is he would take notes. He would annotate how each day went, how each event that was scheduled went, and he would change that on the schedule. If something wasn't working properly, he would simply change the time frame in which it worked. Something else I learned about Benjamin Franklin is by the age of 20, By the age of 20, Benjamin Franklin wrote the 13 values. And for those who are not aware, the 13 values of Benjamin Franklin are used today in 2020, moving into 2021, by business people all over the world. It is a huge tool that is promoted by business people all over the world. And it teaches you a lot of things about not per se the time restraints, but just things that are valuable. That is what hence 13 values. But he wrote that at 20 years old. Benjamin Franklin died at 85 years old. He was also a president. He was an author, an inventor. We know all the things about Benjamin Franklin, right? And again, that is why that spurred the scheduling, the journaling, for me, spurred everything that came after. It was Peter Drucker who said, what gets measured gets managed. And that is why I opened with, is time measurable? Because by our answers, time is measurable to some respect. And by Benjamin Franklin's proof, time is manageable. If you know many people who accomplished more than Benjamin Franklin did, not just in his day, but even in our day, let me know. In fact, I'll even ask, Mike, do you know anyone who's accomplished similar feats or anything that you would say rivals Benjamin Franklin?
It's a very directed question. I don't like the oh shit, what is that line? I don't like the characteristic or the character that you're making of the subject or something like that. I would ask if there's a value in spending life constantly managing time, or if you could do other things. But to actually like answer your question, since Benjamin Franklin, I mean, I know of a guy. What about Tesla? Did Tesla do a bunch of shit?
Nikola Tesla had more ideas than actual inventions.
Okay, what about Turing? So Alan, we're starting to run into the issues of genius, right? Someone like Turing, someone like Anna Lovelace, someone like Tesla will have a bunch of half-invented things, right? But as far as like the path of the producer, because producers love these calendars and they want to make them all sync up and everything work great. Right. Taking the perspective of a producer on Benjamin Franklin, no, I can't. I wouldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you.
Okay. How about you, Nick?
Maybe if we're doing a modern representation, I would think the closest people that we have are probably our billionaire class, right? So you think about the people like Elon Musk, who's got his hands in probably 5 different cookie jars right now. Jeff Bezos is kind of similar to that, although he's not very vocal about all the things that he's in. But I think that there is a certain personality type that lends itself to, like Mike said, the producer sort of lifestyle, or that sort of mechanism. And that sort of mechanism really can thrive in a capitalist society for sure. So there's a certain need, like some people just need that structure. Like I know a lot of very type A people that wouldn't know what to do with themselves if they didn't write it down in a book first. You know what I mean? And I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that. Like I kind of envied that in a certain respect, because most of those people I know get shit done. And like I can get things done too, but I know where my setbacks are. I know where I'm lacking in a lot of respects, and so part of that could probably be alleviated with some sort of structure. So I definitely see the merits in that type of rigid structural system, and I think it partially lends itself to a personality type that already craves that. So it's not necessarily like, there are some people around modernly right now who, say like, oh, well, I used to be a bum, and then I, got my life together and I super structured my life and now I'm a success. Yeah, that does happen. But I tend to believe that, the superstructure modality is sort of a personality type. And that's a manifestation of that personality type.
Okay. How about you, Ayla?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And it does make me think, because like the idea of like genius or success or just even like accomplishments. Is that something reserved only for the geniuses of our time, or is it something that anybody can access and achieve based on, 13 virtues or fastidiousness or, figuring out like the secrets of the universe, basically? Because I do think like, there's luck, there's, there's like a lot at play in terms of like how you develop. Like Benjamin Franklin had two parents. Sometimes just having one is a really big challenge, but he also had like 16 brothers and sisters.
Right.
So it's like, did his early need for competition to like, compete for food and resources and parental attention create that drive in him?
Right.
I don't know, but I do know that like speaking of the SpaceX guy, Elon Musk, I think one of the most interesting things I heard him say was about like all of his actions were guided kind of by like this usefulness principle. And so I do think that to some extent having a guiding principle, whether that's like your religion, that's virtues, that's work ethic, that's your calendar and like keeping a rigid schedule, I do think that adherence to some kind of backbone like that does lead to progress in some way. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Nice. No, I definitely everything you guys said, I'm right on badly. So I like when this all comes full circle because I get a little like flustered and lost for words. I'm like, wait, I expected a little more conflict. Wait. But so two things I wanted to add as well with Benjamin Franklin. Another quote of Benjamin Franklin's is lost time is never found again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes hand in hand with the way he went about doing his schedules, his journals, and everything. What I love about, I've not read the entire Benjamin Franklin autobiography or biography. However, through a lot of different things over time, like different parts of it has come to me, and I have become more and more intrigued. And I mean, after this newest information, I'm really on the cusp of purchasing it. But what I did think was also interesting, lost my thought. I want to get back to that because I thought that was worth adding as well. That's why you write it down. Here we go. Okay. What I also thought was worth adding was just how he went about in making that schedule. So here is an excerpt, not from the book, but from some people who broke down the book and utilized it to teach some points, some about time and others just about livelihood and what was the accountability, excuse me. So here it goes. He made a diary, and in that diary, he wrote a list worth doing tasks, which I already explained a little bit ago. But what he did was it was the way he labeled them that was impressive to me. It was less important task, least important task, which I thought like, okay, those are reasonable. But it was that third one for me, which was avoidable task. Avoidable task. And it took him a week of going through those things to realize that he had been doing much more of the less important and avoidable task than the worth doing task that he already had. That to me was the eye opener. It was that reminder of we're all aware of that extra time, but until someone else points it out or until we see it on paper, it doesn't matter. And the way he began to look at his time that way was he was being told by friends and family and those in his town that he was using his time inappropriately. Now, of course, their thought was he was using his time inappropriately because he didn't have any time to be around them. It just helped him become more efficient. Have you guys ever had that experience in life where someone tried to point something out, maybe trying to snipe at you or maybe they were trying to help, but so to speak, someone said something out of turn or in turn, and it made you readjust how you were going about things?
Sure. I had a mentor who had a very disappointing experience with me, where I tend to program a lot, but I type really fast, and as a self-learned typer, I sometimes mix up the keys. and he actually shortened the delay, the response on the keyboard, and that actually helped. Well, the order was correct, but the delay was causing it to come out incorrectly. So he shortened the delay and then was able to help me become more efficient in the long run because I wasn't spending 0.2 of a second hitting backspace twice and typing the proper key. So that's something that at least pops in my mind immediately. Does that make sense? Is that a proper
No,
answer?
yeah,
Or
that's
am I
perfect.
just bullshitting?
No, that's perfect. And it sounds right on board with me. And even in line with everything else, it was time based. It helped improve your efficiency and thus improved your time. Right on board with what I feel like Benjamin Franklin was teaching us through what he did and how he went about it.
Cool.
How about you, Nick?
Well, I don't know if I can pinpoint a particular moment, but I definitely think about the way I would model success and the people in my life that I would look to for that model. And I think that there are certain attributes to those people that like I definitely can respect, and there are certain things that I try to do with myself as well, like so I'll take like yeah, I got a lot of examples, luckily, because there are great people in my life. But I think one of the people that I look at for that sort of work ethic would be somebody like my stepfather, who um, owned his own restaurant, who was there from 8 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock at night every day, 7 days a week, without fail. Now, of course, that wasn't exactly the most functional type of schedule for a family man, but it is also something that I kind of admire, because though he had a very dependable schedule, it was within that structure that he was allowed to do other things that he liked. So he figured out this formula that he understood that if he spent 6 days in a row at his restaurant, he can spend the seventh day doing the things that he wants to, whether it's, being out with us or going golfing or going on a trip or, so he understood that in his life there was a certain allotment of attention that he needed for his vehicle of success. And as long as he put in those hours, he knew that everything else was like a freebie, that he was able to kind of do whatever he wanted with that extra time. And I think about that sometimes, and not to say that I live that way in my own life, but I do try to structure myself sometimes when I think about it. Like, to me, we just had a car ride at one point not too long ago, future past. And it was a pretty long car ride, and the way I approach those types of things is like, put your head down, do it, and then you get to breathe a sigh of relief once it's done. And so that's kind of one of the ethics that I got from him was, if you have an obstacle or a thing or a task that you have to do, get it done, because then it's not looming over you, and you can do whatever you want with the rest of your time.
Nice. Very nice. How about you, Ayla?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I've had some really interesting interactions with people in my life, and I've gotten some sage wisdom from strangers of all walks of life. But I think the most offensive truism that came at me was when I was like in college and I was trying to pick a major. And the school I went to, there was this option to build a major. So you could do like comparative studies in literature, and then you would be able to basically major in like, I don't know. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to major in French and philosophy, and build this new major where you're looking at um, kind of just like the philosophical works of like the contemporary French philosophical movement, which is pretty niche, but it's also like there was no real end goal. And I think part of the attraction was to have a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B, um, and just take all the classes that I liked. And I remember sitting down with the professor, and I really admired this professor. He was like a French philosophy specialist kind of person, and wicked smart. And I was pitching this idea and trying to see if he would sign off on my thesis proposal. And he just told me, he said, this is too scattered. And, the point of having a major is to focus on a discipline. And to focus on a discipline, we have to be disciplined. And I mean, like, I took it the wrong way initially, because I was like, you're calling me undisciplined? Like, I worked really hard on this and you're shitting on it. And maybe he did. Maybe I should have done that. But at the same time, I think I also really needed to hear that, because I go in this multi-layered thought process where I want to do all the things. And if you give me too many options, I can't do anything with that. So I think that it was a hard hitting dose of reality that I needed, because as much as you want to be about everything and learn about everything, there is also a lot of value in narrowing that focus, and kind of like what Nick was saying is just putting your nose to the grind and just getting through this one lens before you start reinventing the wheel and building on it. So I think discipline is one of those things that really stuck with me.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah, I think I like how it's like we all learned something, not just from someone that we respected, but it all linked to literally just us bettering ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's from our words. That's from
Mhm.
our words, not worrying about what their intent was, but being able to take those experiences and add them to the question. I think that's powerful. For myself, man, I thought of so many different examples. A short one, honestly, is something that I've been taught by multiple mentors, told by multiple people who I know and love. One even being my wife. She probably helped me get the most clear understanding of, just not focusing, not necessarily on negative things, but on things you can't control. Stepping outside of that. And the moment I really, really, truly believe I grasped that, I was then able to lend more energy to the things that are within my control, and thus have more control over my life and my time. But something else outside of that, like I said, that was a small one. But for me, a huge one, was something I learned from my grandmother. And it was about we were talking earlier about, the temporal moments of anger or joy, and how that changes time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, my grandmother always said, you don't go to sleep angry, and you don't leave the home when you're angry, right?
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about that, but having this discussion made it make a little more sense because of the time perception. You won't enjoy your rest. And most importantly, when you wake up, you're still in yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's how bad the anger stopped time.
Or you don't wake up.
Or you don't wake up.
Mm.
You don't wake up. Yeah. So those are my two examples. Well, it's on me. I'm sitting here waiting for somebody else to take the tone. So, look, pat me on that. I thought that was a good question, Keelan.
That was a really good question. No, for sure. Especially because, I forget which one of you said it, but it was talking about time and hindsight, and just being able to look back on things. It's almost as if time is one thing, and then past, present, future are other things. And
Exactly.
and within our mind, it just, there's so many different ways to slice it and think about it and use it. And I love that question, because it's just so so perfect. It's New Year's, trying to think about stuff.
Well, keeping in mind that we don't use time the same way that they use time, say in the Ming Dynasty, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't even use time the same way Benjamin Franklin used time, from what you just explained to us, and the way the railroad induction and that system is when time really became a thing.
Yep.
So within that, I have two more points here I want to get to. And the next point here is, over time has always been a different thing. We're aware that marriages happen with age ranges that were what we would consider obscene today in times past. We'll go back as far as 1400s. We won't even talk about the 18 and the early 1900s. But within that, as far back as we can date in history, there have been rulers and people who have come to power, made powerful decisions, and made huge changes that were beneficial. And they were all of ages where today they would be considered minorities. They would be considered adolescent. We wouldn't even ask them what they want for lunch. We tell them what they want for lunch. I'll give some examples. King Henry VI was crowned king at 9 months of age. That's nuts,
Weird.
but it is real. And he was not crowned and then like his uncle was in power for a few years, but by I think it was his 8th birthday, it was all his. I'm sorry. Yeah. It might have been 5th, actually. It might have been 5th birthday. Ptolemy the 8th, Theos Philopator, which was a ruler in Greece, he took power at 11. King Tutankhamun. Everybody knows King Tut.
Oh yeah.
Not a name that people are unfamiliar with. Are you aware that King Tut came to power at 9 years of age?
Damn.
Died at 14.
Well, died at 19, in fact.
19.
He went into hiding because of his sickness around 14, 15.
Oh.
He wasn't a leper. That was another king that was a leper. That was King Baldwin that was a leper.
Wow.
King Tut, he died of a mysterious sickness. They actually do not know what. They don't know if he was poisoned or if he died of mysterious causes. But he died before the age of 20.
And they found a bug bite on his cheek. Some people think he died of that.
Right. Yes.
Out of the curse.
Yes. Yeah. Some people actually believed he was cursed. That is another. Trust me, King Tut has a lot of lore.
Oh yeah.
King Baldwin IV came into power at the age of 15, and at the age of 16, he saved Jerusalem from capture and died of leprosy. He was a leper, born a leper, and died at the age of 23. Became a king at 15 as a leper and saved Jerusalem from capture as a leper. In his days, a leper would have usually been cast out, but he was born into royalty. Right?
You know, this is making me feel real soft, man. I'm like,
that is the intent, if I'm being honest. That is the intent.
Job well done.
Pope Benedict the 9th was 12 years of age when he became the Pope for the first time. Pope Benedict became Pope 3 times in his lifetime. He was 12 when he was the Pope. The Pope is considered the most knowing of all of the clergy. He was 12. He told everybody what to do. So anyway,
You're laughing.
I'm sorry. It's like he's the Pope.
Yeah.
Do you realize how much power the Pope still has in 2020? Now imagine how much power the Pope had back then.
He probably had a kid by then too.
I'm sure he had a kid by then. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, I'm sure he had an entire family. There is a few stories behind him, but I don't want to go too far into that. Yeah, that's a whole nother story. And then I'll go to today. The youngest ruler of today is still a ruler today. In 1995, King Oyo of Uganda came into power at the age of 3.
3?
In 1995, at the age of 3, he came into power. He sat up on a child-made throne for him, playing with toys and took off his crown during his induction ceremony. He is currently 24 years old and still the king of Uganda. I think that's pretty interesting, but it's only interesting because, again, at 24, people would still think in America, we would say that dude, he doesn't know what he's doing. But he's been running his country successfully. Uganda is one of the top nations. Like, just know there's no issues in Uganda. They aren't worried in Uganda. But I say all of that to say that we look at our kids today and we don't expect them to be able to dress themselves. We don't teach them to dress themselves. We don't teach them how to keep a schedule. And I say all of that because that is what time is. If they utilized the time that they have, the 24 hours from top to bottom, if we all utilized the 24 hours to top to bottom and didn't bask on the negative or the way everyone else feels or what someone else thinks, I think we would be a better society. Now, to close out, I want to share a story from my end, and it adds to the not dwelling in those bad thoughts. And it also shares the belief I have of time. Because of that, I am going to share this story. And this story comes from markandangel.com. I found it again while I was searching what I was searching. I had no clue who these people were. Come to find out, Mark and Angel are a husband and wife, and they are best-selling authors. They've been in New York Times, a bestseller list, and all of that good stuff. Wow. And I only found that out doing my due diligence to find out whose material it was that I had added to my notes. So here's a story called When Our Old Stories Hold Us Back. The story was written in 2018. It's story 2 of the article that was written. It starts, she rarely makes eye contact. Instead, she looks down at the ground because the ground is safer. Because unlike people, it expects nothing in return. She doesn't have to feel ashamed about her past. The ground just accepts her for who she is right now. As she sits at the bar next to me, she stares down at her vodka tonic and then the ground and then her vodka tonic. Most people don't get me, she says. They ask me questions like, what's your problem? Or were you beaten as a child? But I never respond because I don't feel like explaining myself. And I don't think they really care anyway. Just then, a young man sits down at the bar on the opposite side of her. He's a little drunk and he says, you're pretty. May I buy you a drink? She stays silent and looks back down at the ground. After an awkward moment, he accepts the rejection and gets up and walks away. Would you prefer that I leave too? I ask. No, she says without glancing upward. But I could use some fresh air. You don't have to come, but you can if you want to. I follow her outside and we sit on the curb in front of the bar. Brr, it's really chilly tonight. Tell me about it, she says, while maintaining her usual downward gaze. The warm vapor of her breath cuts through the air and bounces off the ground in front of her. So why are you out here with me? I mean, wouldn't you rather be inside in the warmth, talking to the normal people about normal things? I'm out here because I want to be, because I'm not normal. And look, I can see my breath, and we're in San Diego. That's not normal either. Oh, and you're wearing Airwalk sneakers, and so am I, which may have been normal in 1994, but not anymore. She glances up at me and smirks, this time exhaling her breath upward to the moonlight. I see you're wearing a ring. You're married, right? Yeah, I reply. My wife Angel is just getting off work now and heading here to meet me for dinner. She nods her head and then looks back at the ground. Well, you're off the market and safe, I guess, so I can tell you a story. I'm listening. As she speaks, her emotional gaze shifts from the ground to my eyes, to the moonlit sky, to the ground, and then back to my eyes again. This rotation continues in a loop for the duration of her story, and every time her eyes meet mine, she holds them there for a few seconds longer, just a few seconds longer than she did on the previous rotation. I don't interject not once. I listen to every word, and I assimilate the raw emotion present in the tone of her voice and in the depth of her eyes. When she finishes, she says, "Well, now you know my story. You think I'm a freak, don't you?" "Place your right hand on your chest," I tell her. She does. "Do you feel something?" I ask. "Yeah, I feel my heartbeat." "Now close your eyes. Place both your hands on your face and move them around slowly." She does. "What do you feel now?" I ask. "Well, I feel my eyes, my nose, my mouth. I feel my face." "That's right," I reply. "But unlike you, stories don't have heartbeats and they don't have faces because stories are not alive. They're not people. They're just stories." She stares into my eyes for a prolonged moment, smiles sincerely, and says, "Just stories we live through." "Yeah, and stories we learn from." And that's where we end. So for me, that story was a great addition to everything that I was saying a minute ago, because of the way I was explaining, as far as the way our schedules run, the way we raise, the way we look at time from a child coming up until adults. We don't learn early, like, say, a Benjamin Franklin, as Ayla alluded to earlier, having a large family. So we may not learn early how to utilize our time properly. And we may not have anyone to teach us that. So we may have to read an autobiography of Benjamin Franklin to pick that up and then give it to someone else. At the same time, we're not taught that our stories are simply that. Our memories are just stories that we can tell. They're a part of our journey. They are a part of who we are. They are the reason that we take the time to reflect, because some of them are pleasant and some of them are not. That is how and why we perceive time. Excuse me. That is why we perceive time the way we do, and how we got there is not all our fault. Would you guys agree?
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
certainly.
Definitely
Definitely.
argue. I
Right.
would say that we're extremely responsible for what we do, no matter what condition we're in, given the moment of time.
Okay. And with that, for me, that is, it just goes that way simply because I take in all of it, the stories, the experiences, and I appreciate that, Mike, because it's important. Again, like I said earlier, as far as time and perception, it's important for us to remember that we all view it differently. So I'm glad you added that. That it is more for you about not everything else around you, but just you. Like, nah, how you gonna go about
I'm
it?
an extreme narcissist, so it's all about me.
And I think that's, honestly, I know it's weird. Most people won't say that, but I think that's beautiful because most of us aren't concerned with ourselves enough today.
Mm.
Oh, thank you. That makes me feel good.
I'm glad. Now I do want to ask before I pass the mic. So for can you guys think of anything that if you had, let's assume you didn't. Let's assume that you don't think you did already. If you had a better structure, or if you were taught a different structure earlier in life, are there any things that you think would be different about where you are, how you think, or what you do?
Of course. Um, it's a combination of nurture and nature. Um, whether or not the end goal would have been the same. So, where do I begin? Um, so growing up in a lower class family, a working class family, um, working slash underclass. I mean, I've know my folks have made less than 20 grand a year, for example, and somehow pulled all their shit together and got it all to work, which is I don't understand. But there are
In
things
California.
in
Mhm.
California. there are things in higher culture that you are not privy to. It's the socio-intellectual privilege of college graduates and sort of that, master's degree, doctorate degree. So if that structure was different, if, my folks didn't come from that working class, things would definitely be different. Whether or not I would be the same person today, I suppose I wouldn't, but I would hope I would find the same mentors and teachers that I had to guide me along the way so that I am at least similar to who I am today.
Nice. How about you, Nick?
Well, I mean, yeah, the obvious answer is yes. If there were ways you could tweak your origin story, it would be a completely different person. I tend to be okay with who I am. I'm okay with the fact that I'm a flawed individual, and I can still make work towards that. I don't know. I mean, like, it's kind of like waving a magic wand and having all of your problems go away, right? I mean, would it be better if I had better structural integrity or time management skills? Probably. But is it who I am? I don't know. And at this point, it's kind of like, well, there's no magic wand, and so you can wish that you were a certain way, or you can just make steps to improve yourself along the way. And I think that that's, for me, like, I don't necessarily think I would reboot and try it over again, because I feel like I'd be in the same spot, kind of looking back and being like, well, I still have these certain idiosyncrasies that displease me, and that isn't really as much of an externality as it is within me right now. So
Right.
I think I could probably tackle my faults in the present without having to go all the way back to my origins.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Ayla, how about you?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I think I kind of side with Nick on this one though. I mean, because I feel like I like who I am right now, so I wouldn't change things. I know there's more I can change, and I know I can be better in certain areas, but I think that if you'd asked me this question like a year ago, I probably would have had a lot of like things to take umbrage with. But I think after this year, having had so much time for reflection and just having had so many different things come up and interesting conversations with people, um, yeah, I don't know. There's just been a lot of closure on that. So yeah. Oh, what was that? Sorry, we have like explosions over here. Yeah, no. So I wouldn't change anything. No, I think, I mean, like, my parents were pretty rigid and pretty strict, and I think that, could they have been like more Benjamin Franklin-esque? Yes. But also I think that they gave me so much more like well-roundedness, just having had exposure to like my mom's background, growing up on the Navajo reservation. Like, she didn't even have shoes until she was 5, and she didn't have a birth certificate until she was like 3. And like my dad, he was a farmer in West Sacramento, a poor white farmer, which is a little bit like a weird, background. So I think, like, yeah, they taught me some really cool things, and so yeah, I wouldn't change it.
Nice. Very cool. I liked all of you guys' answers. And again, you guys know me. I'm a stickler for honesty and all that good jazz. So, well, and so for me, I'm kind of in the vein with the rest of you. I don't think I would change anything, even if I had that magic wand. Also, keeping in mind, I don't believe in time travel. So I've never really had that, like, oh, if I could just go back and change this. No, because then I might sound like yes or no, sir, and I ain't trying to get there.
Hey,
So,
man, just hop on a plane and fly to a different place.
You get what I'm saying?
You go back to you time travel though.
You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, no, I got you.
for me, I've always looked at it as, forward always, right? Keeping in mind, I believe that in this lifetime, I will have accumulated over $1 billion. I believe that in this lifetime, I will live to be in my triple digits. So I have so much time in front of me. I have nothing to go backwards for. And everything that I've learned before now only lends to the mindset, as Ayla was adding to, how this year has went. Hindsight is 2020, literally. Like
weird.
Right. It was super weird.
What the hell? Did you plan that? That was so deep.
I did it, but that's just how it goes.
My brain just went
silly. But so it's just being able to look back on everything that came before now and where I am today. I wouldn't have the thought process I have if I didn't go through certain things, if my parents weren't who they were. If I didn't go to the schools I went to, I wouldn't have developed some of the mentors I have. If I didn't just speak to some of the particular friends I had growing up, I wouldn't have you guys as friends today. So yeah, wouldn't change it for the world.
Peeling. All the feels.
So yeah, for me, that is the perception of time and how it has changed from, the history books basically, and how they used to go about it. And as you see, I gave a really short example of that, but it proved the point. And how and where we are today. I have a couple more questions that I could go into, but as I said earlier, I didn't put them in the section of must ask, simply because they could create a whole nother hour of dialogue.
I dig it though. So well done.
Yeah, nicely done. I think we should end it on that. I think that was great.
Oh no, we're missing somebody, aren't we?
Yeah, I think we need to round this out.
What the hell you're talking about?
You're not off the hook, buddy.
Shit. I was really hoping for that time.
And you also said you wouldn't change much or couldn't. So, you're friends with us and you got to go next.
My drug of choice is hope, which is fucking damaging.
Nice.
Hope.
Good old
I keep
hope.
thinking of Rogue One. Keep the hope alive. It's been my quote of the year.
I don't have a presentation per se, but a few questions to ask. And the first one goes, do you feel that life is long or short? And we could kick it off with Nick.
Go, Nick, go.
That's a great question. I mean, there's a part of me that always looks at life and kind of in a beautiful sadness that it is so short. At least that's the way I've always perceived it, as something beautifully short. But on the other side of that coin, there are people in this world that really, do not experience a very nice life, and I couldn't imagine them feeling like life was short. So I don't know. I mean, to me, I guess it's really just about the beholder and whether you're happy with your life. I mean, I tend to think that if you're happier with your life, you feel that it might be short. And if you're not so happy with where you're at right now, perhaps it feels much longer.
Intriguing. And what you stand on the happy side of things?
I tend to, yeah. I mean, only because, I don't know. I just don't think that I'm owed anything or guaranteed anything. So every day is kind of well, that's another one in the books. Awesome. I'm grateful for it. And, there's bad things that happen, but I've always tried to maintain this sort of appreciation for life as best as I can.
Do you think life can be long and happy?
That's what everybody wants, right? So it's the dream, but I think you can really only realize that in retrospect, perhaps.
Ayla, do you think life is long or short?
Gosh, I'm gonna go with short. I mean, just in terms. Well, okay, two things. One, I wanted to say this earlier, but it was like, how do we know that all the things in the past really happened? Like, obviously, we have like experts and
Oh,
artifacts
and
and
when he
things
was
like
talking about
that.
Benjamin Franklin, I was like, how do we even know that guy really existed?
Yeah, like someone could just have made all these books and like
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, I wasn't there. So on that perspective, yeah, like assuming that's all true, when I sound like a totally crazy person, but hey, you know what? Suspension of disbelief is good sometimes. But I do think that our lives are really short. Like, there's gonna be people after us and the world is gonna keep on going and we're just this little blip in the universe. And having had the privilege of multiple near-death experiences and having like experienced dying, when it's happening, you don't wake up that day and think, "Oh, this is all I get." And then in that moment, you're like, "Wow, that's all I got." And you start thinking like, "Well, what else is there?" And so it's very weird. A lifetime but yes, so I would say short. It's always short.
What makes your life short?
Is that the second question?
Yeah, to Ayla.
I would say it's short relative to like the planet and the universe.
Not what is relatively short, but what makes your perception of time feel short?
Oh, well, I'm not like 80 years old. So I think if you asked me when I'm 80, I'd be like, yeah, life feels, pretty lengthy. But I mean,
So do you think that only after you reach your point of retirement can you reflect on life and call it long?
I mean, that's like two things. Like you can reflect on your life at any moment. But yeah, in terms of like short or long, I mean, like I'm still thinking about this in like the age of the universe kind of perspective. It's short, but like subjectively, like you're asking like if life is short or long.
To you, to your feeling and your perception of time.
I don't know. I think I would just look at the average life expectancy for a person of my background and then have it. And then at the half point, I would probably say, okay, now I'll say it's long. But anything leading up to that half point, that adjusted half point, is going to be short.
Intriguing.
That's where I'm going
Keelan?
with that.
That is hilarious.
Do you think life is
Life
long or
is
short?
too short, don't you agree? No, I'm playing. So life is short, in fact. And I have proof for you. So I believe life is short.
About your. No, go on. I'm sorry. I cannot. I shouldn't go on.
No. You're fine. You're fine. What were you gonna add?
I'm more curious about your perception of life. And your
Well, yeah.
perception of-
That's exactly what I'm gonna give.
Okay.
So you have two things for me. I've always toyed with the thought of, is life for an individual, or is life the eternity of, like, memories and everything included? Is that a life cycle? Like a soul, is that a life cycle, or is it the physical being? So that's one thing for me that I've always like toyed with that thought and those ideas. But the reason I say life is short, now let's be real, depending on your mood and when you're asked that question, life could be considered long, right? Like if you're in a deep depression, life's long as like it's just not something you want to endure, right?
So true.
But during back to my points about elation, life becomes short. And then you think about our age, like think about your age now, right? Think about how old you are. Now think about how many seconds you've lived, how many days you've lived, how many minutes, hours, months, years you've lived, right? Now think about how many other people have lived and how much you have in front of you. Now we don't know how much we have in front of us, but what we would like to have in front of us, right? Say like measuring us up against our grandparents or someone like that. Well, we have double what we've lived, if not triple, depending on the person. So in that light, it will be short, because I've even heard people that when they get up to those ages saying the exact same things that we're saying right now. Like, oh man, I remember being this age and with my friends in grade school. And like, if you can remember that, it couldn't have been that long ago. Or that says more about the power of the human brain and memories, but you know.
So do you feel like it's a relative thing that looking forward, it looks like you have so much more room to go forward, but once you finally get there, looking back, it feels so short.
Well, again, yeah, that's where I think it will become relative. Because remember, like for me, I plan on living into my triple digits, right? I don't have a target in my triple digits. I want it to be in 120 plus, right? But so for me, I don't think I'll ever have that point where I'm like, oh, it's so much time behind me, I don't have enough in front of me. I don't think I'll get to that point. I think once I hit my the back end of my triple digits, it's like, all right, I did my job. By then, you know, I would expect it to be maybe a little different. But at this age, yeah.
I think it has to do with, you know, personal fulfillment, right? So
yeah. Okay, I like that.
If you're in a position to say, like, you know, like Mike was saying about reliving your life earlier, like if you're in a position to say, you know, at this moment right now, like, are you fulfilled? Then yeah, I mean, a lot of us might be like, well, there's a lot of things that I would like to do. But perhaps after a longer life and you've checked the boxes that you've always wanted to check, you know, maybe you come to a point where you're more comfortable with the duration of life, and perhaps you can even call it long. Yeah.
So then is the duration of life simply tied to some task list that we must all achieve and get through?
I don't know if it's necessarily a task list. I mean, like, it could be a task list. It could be just, I mean, perhaps that's all it is. It's just us trying to run programs and succeed those programs before we get retired. But, you know, like, I don't know. That seems a little sterile.
Right. Well, and so I also want to ask, like, for me, you know, and just in regards to how we view it, right? I think that really, like you said, Nick, the experiences that made me remember something, which is I was watching, you guys know I watch a lot of everything. I was watching, I think it's the Actors Roundtable, and Ted Danson was a part of one of them. And that was a brilliant one too. We could talk about that one off air. But anyway, he started talking about, it wasn't until maybe 4 or 5 years ago. This was filmed in 2019 or 2020. It wasn't until 4 or 5 years ago when he realized, oh shoot, I'm not that guy. I'm not that young guy anymore. Ted Danson hasn't been that guy in like 40 years.
Yeah.
I think stickers came out.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like all the hustle and bustle of his career and everything else, and just keeping up with everything going on. It like he's never looked to me like that guy that was trying to stay in his youth. But it was the way his like, I'm right.
Cold-blooded though, because you're like, I'm sorry. No, I'm laughing because he basically is saying like, oh, like, sorry, just go on without me. I'm gonna mute.
Well, no, you're fine. What I'm saying is, I think Ted Danson is an example to the equation of, you know, is it relative? You know, how we view life towards the back end. Because to what Nick said, it is kind of relative, because you think of a guy like Ted Danson in our eyes, but in his eyes, hey, the checks are still rolling in, the calls are still coming in, the jobs are still going good. I walk out into the places I go, people still know who I am in Hollywood. That's still A-list. So who are we to tell him in his perception that he's not still that guy, that he doesn't still have so much time in front of him? Think about how long that dude's been famous, and he just started thinking to himself it might be coming to an end.
Why do you think that what I've heard is like this agreement that a long life is bad, or something that can only be reflected on at the end. Why? Why?
Oh, sorry.
Why do you think? At least I'm just gonna bounce it back up the line. So Keelan, Ayla, and then Nick. But why do you think a long life is a bad life?
For me,
Mhm.
I don't think a long life is a bad thing. I think the perception of a long life is stressful.
So it's better to just perceive things shortly in the moment.
It's better to worry about the things in your control. If that would be defined as short and in the moment, then sure. The long term is going to come. But the further you're thinking in the future, the less you're dealing with the present. And the same thing for the further you're thinking into the past, the less you're dealing with the present.
And the priority is the present than the future, not the future than the present.
The priority would be based on the person, but in my eyes, the present would be as important as the future, not more or less. They would be 1A, 1B, because without the present, you have no future.
Fair. Ayla, do you think a long life is a bad life, or the mere perception of a long life, as Keelan was saying, is the bad thing, or can be the bad thing depending on your eyes if you're going through negative emotions?
I don't know. I mean, like, I think that question rests on like a happy versus sad kind of framing. And lately, I've been of the mind that we should aim for peace rather than one side of the coin or other. Just kind of this, easing into the day and your life and stuff like that. And yeah, I don't think a long life is necessarily bad. In fact, I think a long life is pretty cool because I mean, like, I think about the way I thought about the world in my 20s, and now I think about things way differently. And I feel like, I don't know. I mean, like, if you weigh in like cognitive decline and stuff like that, then I don't know how that ties in, but I just am excited to think about who I will be 10 years in the future, and then 20 years into the future, and 30. Will I be better? Will I be smarter? Will I have new hobbies? Will I know new friends? So I think like a long life has with it so much experience, and being curious, that makes me happy. Now on the flip side, like, I don't know what retirement is going to look like for our generation. There's a lot of like social economic concerns that I have, but I think that on the whole, yeah, like we're here to live our lives and have experiences. So I think a long life means more experiences, more learning, and that's good.
Nick?
A long life well spent is far too short. And that's kind of the way I think about it. Now, when I say a long life, I don't necessarily mean, and I think we've already mentioned this through Keelan and a little bit with Ayla, but like, it's only long if you don't like it. If you live into 110 and you enjoyed your life and you can look back at it, sure, you might be able to say like, yes, I've had a long life, but even in that sort of respect, I think there's still a part of you that realizes how quickly it went by. That's not to say that it's, if you perceive your life as short, then perhaps it wasn't fulfilling enough. But I think we're destined to always find that life is too short, unless you're in a situation in which life has become unbearable.
Then it's too long.
Then I believe it would be too long. Yeah, certainly.
All right. Cool answers. Next question. If you can put a dollar amount on a second of time, or not even a dollar amount, what do you think a second of time is worth to you?
A second of time is worth a unicorn's laugh.
Wow. So it doesn't exist?
Depends on what's happening in that second, man. Like, if that second is the difference between Nick falling off of a cliff and not, I'm not selling that second for nothing. He's sticking with me.
She's gonna watch me fall off that cliff for the rest of her life.
For 20
She's
bucks.
never gonna sell that.
No. That'd be so sad. That'd be like Ace Ventura when the monkey.
So to Nick, a second of his life is priceless.
Yeah, I mean, at least I think, look, that's a lofty supposition, and I understand that we all go through struggles in life, but I think that if you could look at the sum of the seconds in your life and say, I wouldn't trade it for anything, then you've done something correct. At least on average. I mean, of course, like Ayla said, there's going to be seconds of your life that you're like, I could skip this.
Yeah, when I had that Spinal Tap, I could skip it.
Yeah.
Ayla, what do you think? How much of a second of your life? Just a generic second, any second. It could be when you're getting a Spinal Tap. It could be when you're getting married. It could be anything.
I'm not doing it because you know what? This is very much like that movie with Brendan Fraser, Bedazzled, where he makes a deal with the devil and every single time it ends up horribly. So I could say I want $20 for my 1 second. That's okay. But then it's like, I don't get to define the parameters of that second. I don't get to decide what the contents of that second is. I don't get to know what the consequences of not having that second is. There's a lot of unknowns here, and I don't think there's any dollar amount that I could put on to disrupt the time-space continuum as it affects to my life and the people I love. So I'm not selling.
So how much do you get paid per hour?
It depends on the job. You know me, I work a lot of different jobs.
So you divide time in that hour per second, and you do actually have to kick people out. I imagine Nick's not hanging out with you while you're working, right? Or if he is, you get a lot less done. I would imagine. So there's still a sacrifice. I'm just curious. You don't have to put a dollar amount. I'm curious as to what you feel a second of your life is worth.
Well, see, and then that's different. If you're talking about a future second, like you're gonna pay me a second starting now. So okay, so
Right now.
1,000. Okay, so nothing happened. In theory, I can just be I don't know, $1. I don't care. But if the butterfly effect is real, if I don't. What are you gonna do with that second?
I just know what
I'm
you
selling
feel.
it.
I'm just trying to figure out what you feel.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit too deep into the semantics here.
Yeah, variables here. Just 1 second of your life. You could just say priceless. That's all you could say.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not selling, dude.
Yeah.
I saw the Simpsons episode when Milhouse bought Bart.
She said no, sir.
All right. Keelan, what do you think a second's worth to you?
No deal.
We'll move on. Keelan, what do you think a second's worth to you?
Okay, hold on, wait. I want to make sure, Ayla, you're really not answering, right?
No, I said priceless.
Cool. That is a price. Priceless is a price. I can tell you what I purchased priceless for, but that's So I have a real scale for this, right? And I'm lowballing. I just want to make this very clear to anyone who's listening that want to pay me for the seconds of my life. I am lowballing right now, just to give an example. This is an ultra lowball. Matter of fact, I'm gonna tell you the truth. This is James Harden's life I'm about to tell you about. This is a night in James Harden's paycheck. Take a listen. I don't like talking about other people's pockets, so I'm sorry I even admitted that.
Are you James Harden? I thought you were talking about your life. Are you talking about James Harden's life? What's happening?
That's good. That was a good one. I like that. So my price is $53 per second.
You don't make that $53.95 or
right. It's actually about. I think it's actually like 50 because I did the math. It's like 54.3 or something like that. But I dropped it down to 53. So $53 per second for every second you want in my life.
Every second you want in my life.
That's right. Now, once you hit a whole minute, you owe me $3,180.
There it is.
Nice.
Wait.
So how much would that be in an hour?
In an hour, that's $190,800.
Oh, you should also add in that you want royalties off of any production value within that second.
Oh no, I got one better for you. I got a better one for you.
Yeah.
That's $190,800 per hour, right? Now imagine if I have, I don't know, a 3-hour workday. What you think? $573,000. Now, once we pass that 3-hour mark, it's going up.
I love it.
It's going up.
Done.
I love it.
Now, and mind you, like I said, that's a low ball.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Mike?
Oh, my life has no value. It's priceless. So I want to end things on this reading from Nietzsche. And it's a combined thing. It's basically amor fati, just to love your fate, no matter what happens. And the first one is, I want to learn more and more, to see as beautiful what is necessary in things. Then I shall be one of those who makes things beautiful. Amor fati. Let that be my love henceforth. I do not want to wage war against what is ugly. I do not want to accuse. I do not even want to accuse those who accuse. Looking away shall be my only negation. And all in all, the whole, someday I wish to be only a yes sayer. And then the next thing is, my formula for greatness in human being is amor fati. That one wants nothing to be different. Not forward, not backwards, not in all eternity. Not merely bear what is necessary, still less conceal it. All idealism is mendacy in the face of what is necessary. But love it. In the short, I don't want to bear what is necessary, but I want to love it. I think those are beautiful things on how you should value your time, because valuing your time is very important. But if you want to attach it to a monetary value, you always can. That's it. That's all I got.
Awesome. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I definitely agree. The best measurement of your life is whether you would never change a thing, and I think that we can always strive for that, for sure. Have a little bit less regret in 2021 and a little bit more appreciation for even some of our more baser behaviors. I think that we can all have a bright 2021 if we just kind of embrace the amor fati.
Hear, hear.
I'm gonna first learn how to say that, and then I'm gonna embrace it.
There you go. Well, nice.
A tattoo. That might. I feel like. Yeah.
You want everything as a tattoo. All
I
right.
want everything as a
Make
tattoo.
sure
My
only
whole
you can
arm
read it.
is just gonna be Pokemon in quotes.
Weird. All right.
Make sure only you can read it.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so we actually are running up on the cap for our recording time, so that was the perfect timing. For us to start wrapping things up. But thank you, all of you guys. Thank you, Ayla. Thank you, Keelan, and thank you, Mike. You guys have brought some awesome topics to the table. We did another marathon episode. We've broken the records. We've gone farther than we've ever gone before. Just continue to break our records in the future, I'm sure. But
push the time limits of our platform.
Yes, I want to definitely take the moment and say thank you to you guys for keeping me sane throughout this year. It's not been an easy year for most of us, and I think that the conversations among you guys and the appreciation for my friends and my family has been emphasized throughout this year, and I definitely thank you guys for being a part of it in whatever way we can integrate ourselves in each other's lives. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
thanks,
appreciate all of you guys, man.
Yeah,
Thanks for
sure.
that.
And because people think I don't say it, and some people who know me outside of my circles are always like, "Oh, you're really stiff." I love you guys, man. And I want people to know that I say it.
Well, yeah, we love you guys.
I just don't say it around people who don't matter.
There you go.
Oh, guys.
Well, it makes it a lot easier to deal with all of the craziness that 2020 has been. And I sincerely hope that the people listening, I hope that you've had a good support system throughout this year. And if you do not, please don't despair, because there are always people around. Sometimes even when you're not looking for them, they find a way of popping up in your life. And I hope that you find those types of people for 2021. And I hope that we all can come together in the new year finally and enjoy a live podcast maybe, and a night of celebration. But until then, this will be more than sufficient. And thank you guys so much for listening, and we hope that you have a wonderful new year. Does anybody have anything to say to ring out the new year? Ayla, do you want to start?
Oh gosh, put me on the spot.
Yeah.
Well, no, I guess I will just say, so it's going to be 11 here in California land. So I like to usually end the year with like a calm note. So, if you're listening to this, maybe just take a minute and just enjoy that roominess of the moment. Maybe meditate, take a bath, light a candle, and just kind of honor this crazy year. Yeah, I know, and I know 2021 still has its challenges, but I do feel hopeful, and I think that this, as challenging as it is, ends up, I mean, like, when I look back on my most challenging times in my life pre-2020, I always came out stronger and smarter and with better people around me. So I think to letting this challenge be something that propels all of us, individually and as a group, towards some sort of better something in the future.
Nice. Keelan, what about you, man? Any last things to say before 2020 is in the rearview mirror?
Well, with 2020 moving out, on its way out, it was an eye opener and a growth period for, I think, all of us as a globe, the earth itself, or at minimum, the humans that keep in touch with each other via the media. And I think the most important thing in this, in my opinion, goes right in hand with what Ayla is saying. Have a moment before this is all, within our last time before it all ends, to remind you of you. A lot of us have added things and taken away things and become new me's, a new us. So just remind yourself of who you are while you still have time for that. And as you move through the end of 2020 and into the beginning of 2021, affirm who you are. So that's usually what I do at this time of year and at the beginning.
I like that.
Wonderful. Mike, what about you? Any last inspirations for the end of 2020?
As we used to say before every Counter-Strike match, good luck, have fun, make babies.
Very good. I like it. Well, that is all for our New Year's Eve special. Thank you again for listening. We all really appreciate you guys. Feel free to leave us a comment if you feel so inclined. Leave us a like if you feel so inclined. If you think that we did an adequate job this evening entertaining you for whatever period of time you decided to pop in on us, we appreciate it regardless. Thank you again to Ayla, to Keelan, and to Mike. And yeah, until next time, Cognonauts, you stay out there, and Happy New Year. We'll see you in 2021. Good night.
Peace.
Later.